You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. These words from the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius were written nearly 2,000 years ago, yet they carry a truth that feels more urgent today than ever before. We live in an age of constant stimulation, endless notifications, and societal pressures that can leave us feeling overwhelmed, reactive, and emotionally exhausted. From personal disappointments to global uncertainties, modern life often feels like a series of triggers waiting to pull us into anxiety, frustration, or despair. But what if there was a way to navigate this chaos without being consumed by it? What if you could cultivate a mind that remains steady, clear, and resilient even when everything around you seems to be falling apart? This is where the ancient philosophy of Stoicism offers us something extraordinary, not as a dusty historical relic, but as a practical and profoundly relevant toolkit for emotional resilience. The Stoics understood that life is inherently unpredictable and often difficult, but they also believed that we have the capacity to engineer our inner world in such a way that external circumstances lose their power to destabilize us. It's important to clarify right from the start. Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending that challenges don't affect us. Rather, it's about mastering our responses through mental discipline, perspective shifts, and thoughtful practice. The Stoics were pioneers of what we might today call cognitive behavioral techniques, training themselves to respond to life's events with wisdom, virtue, and calm rather than blind reactivity. In this video, we're going to explore the core principles and practices that allowed the Stoics to cultivate what we might call the non-reactive mind. We'll delve into ideas like the dichotomy of control, which teaches us to focus only on what we can influence, cognitive distancing, which creates space between an event and our response, and amorfati, the profound acceptance of whatever life brings. These aren't just abstract concepts, they are practical strategies that you can apply in your daily life to build emotional resilience, reduce stress, and face challenges with greater clarity and courage. Whether you're dealing with personal setbacks, professional pressures, or the broader uncertainties of our time, the wisdom of Stoicism offers a path to inner stability. By the end of this journey, you'll have a deeper understanding of how to engineer your emotions, withstand collapse, and thrive no matter what comes your way. Now, if we're going to build this resilient, non-reactive mind, we need to start with the absolute bedrock of Stoic philosophy, the principle that underpins everything else, the dichotomy of control. This is the essential first step, the mental sorting system that the Stoics used to navigate the world. It's a beautifully simple yet incredibly powerful idea that divides all of existence into two distinct categories, those things that are within our control and those things that are not. On one side of this divide, firmly within our command, are our own internal faculties, our judgments, our opinions, our intentions, our desires, and our actions. These are the choices we make in how we see the world and how we respond to it. On the other side, entirely outside of our control, is pretty much everything else: external events, the past and the future, the actions of other people, our reputation, our wealth, our health, and even our own bodies to a large extent. The core Stoic insight is that suffering and anxiety arise primarily when we waste our energy trying to control the things in that second category, while neglecting our absolute authority over the first. The Stoic teacher Epictetus, who was born a slave and faced immense adversity, put it with stunning clarity in his handbook, the Enchiridion. He wrote, "Some things are within our power while others are not." Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, our reputation, our office, and, in a word, whatever is not of our own doing. His central instruction, then, was to focus all of our attention and effort exclusively on what is within our power, our own choices and judgments, and to accept with grace everything that is not. This isn't a call to passivity, it's a call to radical clarity about where our true agency lies. Let's bring this out of ancient Greece and into your life right now with a very common modern example. Imagine you're driving to an incredibly important job interview. You've prepared perfectly, you're dressed well, and you've left what you believe is plenty of time. Then you hit a massive, unexpected traffic jam. Your blood pressure starts to rise, you grip the steering wheel, you curse the other drivers, the city planners, the universe itself. You frantically check your watch every 30 seconds, each tick amplifying your stress. You are now in a state of full-blown panic and frustration, but let's apply the dichotomy of control. The traffic jam, that is 100% outside of your control. You did not cause it, and you cannot make it disappear. Your reaction to the traffic jam, however, that is 100% within your control. You can choose to rage against the inevitable, filling your body with stress hormones and arriving at the interview flustered and angry. Or you can accept the reality of the situation. You can take a deep breath, put on an interesting podcast, and use the unexpected time to calmly review your talking points. You can call the interviewer, apologize for the delay, and explain you're en route. One reaction wastes precious energy on an unchangeable fact and likely ruins your performance. The other conserves your energy and allows you to adapt effectively to the circumstance. The event itself is neutral. Your judgment of it is what creates the suffering. The same principle applies to something like criticism at work. A colleague or a client might harshly criticize a project you've poured your heart into. Their opinion and their words are not within your control. They are external events, but your judgment of that criticism, whether you take it as a personal attack or as potentially useful feedback, and your subsequent actions, whether you respond defensively or with curiosity, are entirely within your sphere of power. By focusing your efforts there, you transform a potential emotional trigger into an opportunity for professional growth, or at the very least for practicing grace under pressure. So here's a question to sit with for a moment. Think about the things that typically occupy your worry, the things that keep you up at night or spike your anxiety during the day. Now mentally sort them. How many of them truly belong in the category of things you can directly control? Are you worrying about your own efforts and your own character? Or are you exhausting yourself by trying to mentally manage external outcomes, other people's choices, or events that haven't even happened yet? This simple act of sorting is the first and most profound step in engineering a mind that is not easily shaken, a mind that knows its own power and its own limits, and spends its energy wisely. Now, having established that foundational filter of control, we can build upon it with another powerful Stoic technique, cognitive distancing. This is the practice of consciously inserting a pause, a moment of mental space between an external event and your internal reaction to it. It's about learning to observe what happens without immediately getting swept away by it, creating just enough separation to choose your response rather than being hijacked by your initial impulse. The Stoics aim to view life's events from a more detached, almost clinical perspective, as if they were a scientist observing an experiment or a watchman surveying the landscape from a high tower. This isn't about becoming cold or unfeeling. It's about gaining clarity. By stepping back from the raw, subjective experience, you can see the event for what it truly is, separate from the layers of emotional judgment and personal narrative we instinctively pile onto it. The Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius provided perhaps the most concise and powerful instruction for this practice in his private journal, Meditations. He wrote, "Remove the judgment, and you have removed the thought I am hurt. Remove the thought I am hurt, and the hurt itself is removed." Let's unpack that profound idea. Marcus is pointing out that an event itself is just an event. The pain, the offense, the anger, these are not inherent in the event. They are products of our judgment about the event. The criticism from your boss is just sound waves or words on a screen. The flat tire is just a piece of rubber losing air. It is our rapid, often unconscious judgment that labels these events as catastrophic, unfair, or personal. Cognitive distancing is the tool that allows us to intercept that automatic judgment before it can cause emotional havoc. It's the mental equivalent of taking a deep breath before you speak. Consider a modern scenario. You're going about your day when you receive a startling piece of bad news. Perhaps an unexpected bill arrives, or you get a concerning message from your doctor asking you to call back immediately. The immediate, visceral reaction is often a jolt of anxiety, a tightening in the chest, a mind racing toward the worst possible conclusions. This is the reactive impulse, the raw, unfiltered response. Now imagine applying cognitive distancing. Instead of spiraling into that anxiety, you consciously pause. You observe the news as a neutral fact for just a moment. A letter from the hospital has arrived, or the number on this bill is higher than anticipated. You acknowledge the initial surge of feeling without letting it dictate your next move. You might even say to yourself, "This is a development. I will gather more information before I decide what it means." That simple pause, that act of observation, fundamentally changes everything. It transforms you from a passive victim of circumstance into an active investigator and decision maker. It creates the room for a thoughtful response. This practice is a muscle that can be strengthened with time. The more you practice creating that space, even in minor daily irritations, someone cutting you off in traffic, a rude comment from a stranger, a minor mistake at work, the more naturally it will come to you when a truly significant challenge arises. It's in that space between event and reaction that your freedom resides. It's where you reclaim your agency. So take a moment to reflect on your own patterns. How often do you find yourself reacting immediately and impulsively to things that happen, large and small? How might your experience of a difficult day change if you built in just a few more seconds of observation before you chose your response? That small gap is where Stoic wisdom transforms from a philosophy into a lived practice, and where you begin to truly engineer a mind that is not easily overwhelmed. So if cognitive distancing is the practice of creating space to choose our response, the next logical step in the Stoic toolkit is a technique that might seem counterintuitive at first, but is incredibly effective for building profound emotional resilience. This practice is known as Premeditatio Malorum, which translates from Latin as the premeditation of evils. Now that sounds rather dark and pessimistic, doesn't it? It conjures images of constantly dwelling on everything that could possibly go wrong, but that's a fundamental misunderstanding of its purpose. For the Stoics, this was not an exercise in worry or fostering a negative outlook. It was, in fact, the exact opposite. It was a deliberate and courageous form of psychological inoculation. The core idea is to periodically and calmly contemplate the potential setbacks, losses, or difficulties that life could throw your way. By mentally rehearsing these adversities in a controlled setting, you effectively desensitize yourself to their emotional shock value. when, or if they actually happen, you are not blindsided. You have already walked that path in your mind, and you meet the reality with a sense of preparedness and calm rather than panic and despair. The Stoic philosopher Seneca, a man who experienced immense wealth, power, and ultimately a tragic forced suicide, was a powerful advocate for this practice. He wrote, "He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand." Think about the profound truth in that statement. Fear and anxiety are often born from the unknown, from the sudden and the unexpected. By perceiving challenges beforehand, we strip them of their ability to ambush us emotionally. Seneca continues, advising us to rehearse them in your mind: exile, torture, war, shipwreck. He wasn't suggesting we live in constant fear of these extreme events, but rather that we should make them familiar to our thoughts so that nothing life does to us can be entirely novel. This rehearsal, he argued, is what allows a person to remain unshaken, to say to fate, "You were only doing what I knew you could do." We can see this principle in action through a historical anecdote from the life of another Stoic, the statesman Cato the Younger. Cato was a fierce defender of the Roman Republic and an opponent of Julius Caesar's rise to power. Knowing that civil war was likely and that his cause might fail, he didn't simply hope for the best. He actively prepared for the worst. He practiced Premeditatio Malorum by mentally embracing the possibility of his own defeat, the loss of his political standing, and even his death. He envisioned himself responding to these catastrophes with virtue and courage. So when his forces were ultimately defeated and he found himself on the losing side, his reaction was not one of hysterical despair. It was a calm, resigned acceptance. He had already lived through this moment 1,000 times in his mind. The actual event held no new terror for him. This mental preparation gave him the clarity to choose his final actions according to his principles, rather than being driven by raw, reactive emotion. Let's bring this into a modern context that doesn't involve civil war or exile. Imagine you have a crucial presentation at work, one that could lead to a major promotion. The typical approach might be to visualize everything going perfectly: the flawless delivery, the enthusiastic applause, the immediate approval. But what happens if the technology fails? What if a key stakeholder challenges your data aggressively? What if you simply freeze up? Premeditatio Malorum would have you spend a few moments considering these possibilities not as nightmares, but as practical scenarios. You'd mentally walk through what you would do if the projector died. I have printed copies as a backup, and I can speak confidently without the slides. You'd consider the aggressive question: if my data is challenged, I will remain calm, acknowledge the perspective, and refer to my appendix for supporting evidence. By doing this, you aren't inviting failure. You are building a robust psychological safety net. When you walk into that room, you carry a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are prepared for more than just the ideal outcome. You are prepared for reality in all its unpredictable complexity. This practice fundamentally rewires our relationship with uncertainty. Instead of trying to ignore potential problems, which only makes them scarier, we bring them into the light of our rational mind and examine them. We realize that we can handle more than we think. The anxiety that usually comes from trying to avoid thinking about bad things actually dissipates when we confront them voluntarily and with a problem-solving mindset. So take a moment to reflect on your own life. What is something you are hoping will go well in the near future? Now, instead of pushing away the fears, gently invite them in. What are the 3 most reasonable challenges that could arise? And more importantly, what would your calm, capable, stoic self do in each of those situations? You might just find that this act of preparation doesn't increase your anxiety. but instead gives you a newfound sense of control and resilience, readying you not just for success, but for whatever comes your way. This brings us to one of the most beautiful and transformative concepts in the entire Stoic arsenal, amor fati, a Latin phrase that translates to a love of one's fate. If the previous practices were about creating space and preparing for adversity, amor fati is about taking a radical, profound step further. It's not merely about accepting or enduring what happens. It's about actively embracing it, loving it, and seeing every single event, especially the difficult and unexpected ones, as not only necessary but beneficial. This mindset is the ultimate alchemy for the human spirit. It transforms leaden obstacles into golden opportunities for growth, and it reframes life's entire narrative from a series of random happenings to a perfectly arranged curriculum for your development. The goal is to look at every twist and turn, every setback and surprise, and say, "This too is for me. This is exactly what I need." While the phrase amor fati is most famously associated with the 19th century German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, the sentiment is pure, bedrock Stoicism. Nietzsche wrote, "My formula for greatness in a human being is amor fati. That one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. Not merely bear what is necessary, still less conceal it but love it." This is a powerful echo of the Stoic emperor Marcus Aurelius, who centuries earlier urged himself in his private writings to accept everything which happens, even if it seems disagreeable, because it leads to this, the health of the universe. He saw his own life's challenges as threads woven into a larger, perfect tapestry by nature itself. To reject one thread is to reject the integrity and beauty of the whole design. The Stoic doesn't just tolerate fate, they welcome it with open arms, trusting in a deeper logic and order. To understand how this works in practice, let's consider a very modern and deeply personal example: the experience of an unexpected job loss. The initial, natural reaction is often one of shock, fear, and perhaps even shame. The narrative we tell ourselves can be devastating. "I failed. My career is over." This is a catastrophe. We resist the event, fighting against the reality of it, which only amplifies the emotional pain. Now, apply the lens of amor fati. This isn't about pretending the situation is easy or joyful in the moment. It's about consciously choosing a different, more empowering interpretation. It's about asking, how could this be for me? What door is this closing so that a better one can open? Perhaps this job loss forces you to finally pursue a passion project you never had the courage to attempt. Maybe it frees you from a toxic work environment you had tolerated for far too long. It could be the catalyst that pushes you to learn new skills, to network in different circles, or to reassess what truly brings you fulfillment in your career. The person who practices amor fati doesn't deny the difficulty, but they actively search for the hidden gift within it. They love their fate not for the pain it brings, but for the strength, wisdom, and new direction it makes possible. This principle applies to the smallest of daily inconveniences as well. The rain that cancels your picnic becomes a chance for a cozy afternoon indoors with a book you've been meaning to read. The flat tire becomes an opportunity to practice patience and problem solving. By embracing these events rather than fighting them, you stop wasting energy on resistance and start flowing with the current of life. You move from a stance of conflict with reality to one of collaboration with it. This shift doesn't make you passive, it makes you incredibly agile and resilient. You are no longer derailed by circumstance because you have learned to find the value in all of it. So, take a moment to look at your own life through this powerful Stoic lens. Where are you currently resisting what is? What event or circumstance are you struggling to accept, fighting against with all your might? Now, imagine what might happen if you chose, just for a moment, to embrace it. Not to approve of it, but to accept its reality and to look for the necessity within it. How might that single shift in perspective change your emotional landscape? How might it open up possibilities for growth that your resistance has been blinding you to? Amorfati is the practice of finding the silver lining not as a cliché, but as a fundamental truth of existence, the conviction that everything that happens is fodder for building a wiser, stronger, and more virtuous self. Now, if we've learned to embrace our fate with Amorfati, the next essential skill in the Stoic toolkit is what they call the Discipline of Assent. This is the crucial practice of critically examining our initial, automatic impressions of events before we give them our mental approval and allow them to shape our emotions and actions. Think of your mind as a courtroom. An impression, a thought, a perception, a piece of news walks in and makes its case. The discipline of assent is you, acting as the wise and skeptical judge, refusing to immediately slam the gavel and declare a verdict. Instead, you pause the proceedings, you ask for evidence, you question the witness, you consider alternative interpretations. The Stoics understood that our first, raw impression of any situation is often incomplete, biased, or just plain wrong. It's a snap judgment, a story our brain instantly creates to make sense of the world. But that story isn't reality itself. The discipline of assent is the powerful act of separating the objective event from the subjective narrative we layer on top of it. The great Stoic teacher Epictetus, who began his life in slavery and understood profound hardship, gave us the clearest possible instruction on this matter. He said, "Men are disturbed not by things but by the views which they take of them. Let that sink in for a moment. The thing itself, the event, the comment, the situation is neutral. It holds no inherent emotional charge. It is our judgment, our interpretation, our assent to a particular view of the thing that generates the disturbance within us." Epictetus is pointing directly to the source of our emotional suffering. It's not out there in the world. It's right here, in the private courtroom of our own mind, in the moment we too readily agree with a flawed or harmful impression. Consider a common, modern scenario that perfectly illustrates this discipline. You're at work, and you overhear two colleagues whispering and laughing. You catch your name in the mix. The immediate, automatic impression that floods your mind might be, "They are gossiping about me. They are making fun of me. They don't like me." This impression arrives with a full emotional payload, feelings of insecurity, anger, embarrassment, and social anxiety. If you give your immediate assent to this impression, if you, as the judge, simply accept it as undeniable truth, you will spend the rest of the day feeling hurt and resentful. Your interactions with those colleagues will be strained and defensive. You have been disturbed not by their whispering, but by your unchallenged interpretation of it. Now apply the discipline of assent. The event is the same. You heard whispering and your name, but instead of immediately agreeing with the negative story, you pause the trial. You cross-examine the impression. You ask for its evidence. Is it absolutely true that they were gossiping maliciously about me? What other, more benign explanations could there be? Perhaps they were sharing a funny story that involved you, but wasn't about you in a negative way. Maybe one of them was simply reminding the other to include you in an upcoming lunch plan. It's even possible you misheard your name entirely. By withholding your immediate assent, you create a buffer of possibility. You deny the initial impression the power to dictate your emotional state. You can then choose to act based on evidence rather than assumption, perhaps by simply asking them what they were discussing with a light and curious tone, or by deciding it's not important enough to warrant your energy and letting it go entirely. The event didn't change, but your relationship to it was transformed by a moment of conscious scrutiny. This practice is a form of mental hygiene. It's about cleaning up the automatic, often negative, stories we tell ourselves all day long. We assent to the impression that a rainy day is bad and we feel grumpy. We assent to the impression that a slow driver is out to get us and we feel road rage. We assent to the impression that a terse email from our partner means they are angry and we feel anxious. Each time we do this without questioning, we hand over the reins of our emotional well-being to external events and our own unexamined biases. The discipline of assent is the process of taking those reins back. It's recognizing that between an event and your reaction lies a space, and in that space is your power to choose your interpretation, and through that interpretation you choose your peace. So, as you move through your day, try to become more aware of those automatic impressions. How often does a simple event lead you directly into a spiral of distress because you accepted the first story your mind offered? What might change if you made it a habit to politely tell your impressions, "Thank you for your testimony. I'll take it under advisement," before you ever issue a final verdict? This practice of examining our judgments naturally leads us to a powerful Stoic meditation designed to put those very judgments into their proper context. It's called the view from above, and it is a profound mental exercise in expanding your perspective to a truly cosmic scale. The goal is to actively use your imagination to pull back from your immediate, ground-level problems and see your life from a vantage point so high and so vast that your everyday concerns begin to shrink into their true, manageable proportions. The Stoics would mentally journey upwards, imagining themselves looking down on their city, then their country, then the entire earth as a spinning globe, and finally out into the infinite expanse of the cosmos. They would also journey through time, contemplating the billions of years that passed before they were born, and the billions that will follow after they are gone. This wasn't an exercise in making themselves feel small or insignificant. It was a tool for achieving tranquility by recognizing that most of what we worry about is, in the grand tapestry of existence, incredibly minor and temporary. Marcus Aurelius was a master of this technique, and he frequently returned to it in his private meditations as a way to ground himself and drain his anxieties of their power. He wrote, "You can rid yourself of many useless things among those that disturb you, for they lie entirely in your imagination, and you will then gain for yourself ample space by comprehending the whole universe in your mind, and by contemplating the eternity of time, and observing the rapid change of every part of everything." He is giving us a direct prescription here. The feeling of being cramped, overwhelmed, and disturbed is an illusion of a narrow perspective. The antidote is to consciously create ample space in your mind by filling it with thoughts of the universe and eternity. From that vantage point, the quarrel with a colleague or the fear of a missed deadline cannot maintain its intense, urgent grip on your psyche. Let's make this incredibly practical. Imagine you're at the office and you've just made a noticeable, embarrassing mistake during a team meeting. Perhaps you misstated a key figure or fumbled a presentation slide. The meeting ends and you retreat to your desk, your heart sinking. The feeling is intense and visceral, a hot wave of shame and anxiety. You can't stop replaying the moment in your head, imagining the judgment of your peers and your manager. It feels like a career-defining catastrophe. Now, activate the view from above. Close your eyes for just 30 seconds and begin to zoom out. See yourself there at your desk, a single person in a single building. Now pull back further. See your city with its countless buildings and millions of people, each with their own hopes, fears, and much larger problems. Pull back further until the continent is visible, then the whole beautiful blue and white marble of Earth hanging in the black void of space. From here, can you even see your office building? Can you see the meeting room? From this perspective, your mistake is not even a microscopic speck. It is pure nothingness against the awe-inspiring scale of the cosmos. Now, journey through time. This meeting happened 1 hour ago. A year from now, will anyone remember it? A decade from now, in 100 years, everyone in that room, including you, will be gone, and their memories with them. This isn't a nihilistic thought, it is a liberating one. It instantly deflates the balloon of your anxiety, not by dismissing your experience, but by placing it within a truer, larger framework of reality. The mistake still exists, and you can still learn from it and correct it, but its emotional weight has been dissolved by perspective. This shift doesn't promote irresponsibility, it promotes wisdom. It allows you to address the issue from a place of calm competence rather than panicked fear. You can now send a calm, professional email correcting the figure, or you can prepare more thoroughly for the next meeting, all without the debilitating weight of self-flagellation. The view from above is the ultimate tool for combating what is often called catastrophizing, our mind's tendency to blow problems far out of proportion. It is a direct injection of realism into our subjective emotional experience. So the next time you feel that familiar tightness of overwhelm, whether it's from a work stress, a social slight, or a personal worry, give this a try. Don't just tell yourself it's not a big deal. Actually take the mental journey, zoom out to the stars and zoom forward through centuries. See if the problem doesn't loosen its grip, leaving you with the clarity and calm needed to handle what is actually within your control. This practice of zooming out to gain perspective is intimately connected to a core objective of Stoic philosophy, the cultivation of what we can call objective judgment. This is the disciplined effort to perceive events, situations, and sensations for what they truly are in their raw, unfiltered reality, before our minds rush to slap a label of good or bad on them. The fundamental Stoic insight here is that nothing in the external world is inherently positive or negative. These valuations are not discovered in the events themselves, but are instead assigned by us. Our suffering, therefore, doesn't originate from the events we encounter, but from the personal judgments we layer on top of them. An event is just an event. It is our story about the event, our interpretation, our spin, our narrative, that carries the emotional charge for better or for worse. The goal of objective judgment is to strip away that narrative and see the thing itself in its simple, neutral truth. The Stoic teacher Epictetus, whose teachings have guided us through several of these principles, articulated this idea with stunning clarity. He famously wrote, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." But he went even deeper, explaining that people are not disturbed by things, but by the principles and notions which they form concerning things. And in perhaps his most direct statement on the matter, he said, "Remember, it is not the man who reviles or strikes you who insults you, but it is your judgment that these men are insulting you." This is the ultimate empowerment. Epictetus is handing you the keys to your own emotional freedom. He is saying that the power to be insulted, to be hurt, to be offended, does not reside in the other person's action. That power resides solely within you, in your private decision to interpret their action as an insult. If you can withhold that judgment, you effectively disarm the entire situation. The external action becomes nothing more than a neutral occurrence, like the wind blowing or a cloud passing in the sky. Let's bring this down from the philosophical clouds and into a scenario everyone can relate to. Imagine you've been looking forward to a weekend picnic for weeks. You've packed a beautiful basket, invited friends, and envisioned a perfect sunny afternoon in the park. You wake up on the morning of the picnic, and instead of sunshine, you hear the steady patter of rain against your window. The immediate, automatic judgment that most of us would make is, "This is terrible." This is a bad day. The weather ruined my plans. Notice the language: ruined, bad, terrible. These are strong value judgments we are applying to a simple meteorological event. The rain itself is just water falling from the sky. It is a neutral fact of nature. It waters the plants, fills the reservoirs, and cleans the air. It has no malicious intent to target your picnic. The suffering you feel, the disappointment, the frustration, the sense of loss is not caused by the rain. It is caused by your judgment that the rain is a bad thing that has happened to you. Your expectation of a sunny picnic has collided with the reality of a rainy day, and your mind judges that reality as unacceptable. Now, apply the Stoic practice of objective judgment. The event is the same, rain is falling, but instead of immediately labeling it as a catastrophe, you observe it without the value charge. You state the objective fact: it is raining. From that neutral starting point, a world of new possibilities opens up. Instead of being stuck in frustration, you are free to adapt. You can move the picnic indoors and have a cozy gathering. You can reschedule it for a sunnier day and enjoy a quiet morning reading a book with the sound of rain as your soundtrack. You can even decide to embrace the adventure and have the picnic anyway, with umbrellas and rain boots, creating a unique and memorable experience. The event didn't change, but your judgment of it did, and that changed everything. The obstacle, as the Stoics would say, truly became the way. This practice requires constant vigilance because our minds are meaning-making machines, hardwired to judge and interpret everything instantly. We don't just see a delayed train, we see a waste of our precious time and an incompetent transit system. We don't just hear critical feedback, we hear a personal attack and a sign of failure. Training in objective judgment is the process of catching ourselves in the act of adding that extra, suffering-inducing layer. It's about pausing and asking, what is the bare, objective truth of this situation, separate from my opinion about it? For just one day, try this experiment. Make a conscious effort to describe the events of your day to yourself in purely neutral, observational language. The traffic isn't a nightmare, it is a line of cars moving slowly. Your coworker's short email isn't rude, it is a message composed of 15 words. Your child's tantrum isn't a disaster, it is a small person expressing big emotions with sound and movement. You will likely find this incredibly difficult at first, but that's the point. You are building a new mental muscle. And as you practice, you may just discover a profound sense of peace, realizing that much of the emotional turbulence you experience daily is not mandated by the world around you, but is quietly, persistently generated by the judgments you've learned to automatically apply. This brings us to a concept that serves as the ultimate aim of all these practices, the idea of the inner citadel. If the dichotomy of control defines our territory and cognitive distancing creates our defensive moat, then the inner citadel is the unassailable fortress at the very center of our being. It is the sanctuary of the self, a core of profound peace and unshakable strength that remains entirely independent of the chaos, opinions, and unforeseen events of the external world. The Stoics envisioned this not as a place of escape from reality, but as a position of supreme command from which we can engage with the world on our own terms, without being emotionally ransacked by it. While external circumstances can batter the walls of our physical lives, affecting our health, our possessions, our reputations, they cannot breach the gates of this inner fortress unless we willingly lower the drawbridge and invite them in. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire often on the brink of war and internal strife, frequently meditated on this concept as his ultimate source of stability. He wrote, "People look for retreats for themselves in the country, by the coast, or in the hills. There is nowhere that a person can find a more peaceful and trouble-free retreat than in his own mind, so constantly give yourself this retreat and renew yourself. In the midst of leading armies and managing a vast, complex empire, his most reliable sanctuary was not a physical location. It was the private, inviolable space of his own judgment and character. He is reminding us that we all have immediate, constant access to this retreat. You don't need to book a vacation or find a quiet cabin in the woods to find peace. You can, at any moment, step back from the noise of the world and return to the calm authority of your own mind. This is the essence of the inner citadel. It is portable, always available, and entirely under your sovereign control. We can see a powerful historical embodiment of this principle in the life and death of the philosopher Socrates. Though he predates the formal school of Stoicism, his life was a masterclass in the very virtues the Stoics would later champion. When Socrates was sentenced to death by the Athenian court on charges of corrupting the youth and impiety, he was presented with an opportunity to escape. His friends had arranged a bribe for the guards and a plan for him to flee into exile, but Socrates refused. His inner citadel was built on a foundation of unwavering commitment to his principles and to the laws of the city he loved. The external circumstances, the unjust verdict, the threat of death were terrifying, but they did not shake his inner conviction. He calmly accepted his sentence and drank the hemlock, discussing the immortality of the soul with his grieving friends until his final moments. His peace did not come from his external freedom, which was being taken away, but from his internal freedom, which remained utterly intact. His citadel was so strong that even the prospect of death could not besiege it. In our modern lives, the threats we face are rarely so dire, but the principle is exactly the same. Your inner citadel is what remains solid when you receive a devastating piece of criticism, when a project you've worked on for months falls apart, or when a personal relationship faces a painful rupture. It is the part of you that knows your core values, your inherent worth, and your capacity to endure, regardless of the shifting winds of fortune. It's not a state of emotional numbness, it is a state of profound emotional resilience. You feel the sting of the event, but the sting doesn't define you or destroy you. You can acknowledge the pain while simultaneously knowing from a deep and unassailable place that you will navigate it, learn from it, and continue. So let's make this practical. What does your own inner citadel look like? If you were to close your eyes and envision this fortress of your mind, what are its foundations made of? Perhaps they are built on your core values, things like integrity, compassion, curiosity, or courage. What are its walls? Maybe they are constructed from the practices we've discussed, the discipline of assent that filters out harmful judgments, the view from above that provides perspective, and the amorfati that allows you to embrace all outcomes. And how do you strengthen it? You strengthen it daily through the small, consistent choices. You strengthen it every time you pause before reacting angrily to a provocation, every time you choose to see a setback as a neutral challenge rather than a personal failure, and every time you retreat into your own mind for a moment of quiet reflection amidst a hectic day. Your citadel is not built in a day, but brick by conscious brick, through the repeated practice of returning to your own inner authority. It is the ultimate engineering project of the self, creating a refuge of peace that no external collapse can ever destroy. Now, if the inner citadel represents the ultimate stronghold of our peace, how do we go about actually building and fortifying its walls? The Stoics had a powerful and proactive answer. They didn't just wait for adversity to find them, they went out and courted it voluntarily. This practice, which we might call the deliberate embrace of discomfort, was a cornerstone of their training. It was a form of psychological and emotional calisthenics, a way to stress test their resilience in a controlled environment so that when real, unexpected hardship struck, they would be prepared. The Stoics understood that a muscle only grows stronger when it is challenged, and they applied this same principle directly to the mind and character. By willingly stepping into situations of slight discomfort, deprivation, or difficulty, they were inoculating themselves against the fear of those very things, proving to themselves that they could not only endure but thrive amidst challenge. The Roman philosopher Seneca, a man of immense wealth who could have easily insulated himself from any discomfort, was a vocal proponent of this training. He argued that to truly be free from the fear of poverty, one must periodically experience a simpler way of living. He wrote, "Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, 'Is this the condition that I feared?' This is the essence of the practice." It's a direct, personal experiment designed to answer our deepest anxieties with lived experience. By voluntarily practicing poverty for a few days, eating simple food, wearing old clothes, abstaining from luxuries, Seneca was not punishing himself. He was demonstrating to his own psyche that these conditions were manageable. He was dismantling the power that the fear of poverty held over him, because he had first-hand evidence that he could handle its reality. The goal was to reach a state where the loss of external comforts would be an inconvenience, not a catastrophe. We can see this philosophy translated into a myriad of practical training methods in the ancient world. It wasn't just about poverty. Stoics and other philosophically minded individuals would practice fasting, not for dietary reasons, but to prove to themselves that they could master their hunger and their attachment to pleasure. They would expose themselves to cold weather without adequate clothing, or choose to walk long distances instead of taking a carriage, all to cultivate what they called apatheia, not apathy, but a state of being undisturbed by external forces. They were building their tolerance for discomfort, expanding their window of what they could handle with equanimity. This voluntary hardship was like a vaccine for the soul, a small, controlled dose of the pathogen to build immunity against a full-blown case of the disease. This ancient idea finds a powerful parallel in our modern fascination with practices like cold water immersion, endurance sports, and digital minimalism. The current popularity of ice baths and winter swimming isn't just a fad, it's a very Stoic pursuit. When you voluntarily lower yourself into a tub of freezing water, your entire biology screams at you to get out. Your heart races, your breath catches, and every instinct is shouting about danger. But by choosing to stay in, by regulating your breath and calming your mind, you are engaging in a direct dialogue with your own fear and discomfort. You are proving to your primal brain that you are in command, that this sensation, while intense, is not an emergency. You are building resilience not in the abstract, but in the very real, shivering confines of your own body. Each successful session is a brick added to the wall of your inner citadel, a tangible piece of evidence that you can handle intense physical and mental stress. The same principle applies in a professional or creative context. Volunteering for a challenging project at work that stretches your skills beyond their current limits is a form of modern Stoic practice. You are willingly entering a state of uncertainty, potential failure, and mental strain. You might have to work longer hours, learn new software, or face criticism. This is not masochism, it is training. It is the equivalent of Seneca's voluntary poverty, but applied to your career. By navigating this self-imposed challenge, you are not just building your resume, you are building your confidence and your capacity to handle professional adversity. When a truly difficult, unasked-for challenge eventually arises, a market downturn, a difficult client, a failed product launch, you will have a deep well of experience to draw from. You will know from having done it before that you can navigate uncertainty and pressure because you have chosen to do so on your own terms. So the invitation here is a practical one. Instead of always seeking the path of least resistance, consider where you might gently introduce a little beneficial friction into your own life. What is one small discomfort you could voluntarily embrace this week as training for your resilience? It doesn't have to be dramatic. Perhaps it's taking a cold shower for the first minute of your morning routine. Maybe it's leaving your phone at home during a walk, practicing being alone with your thoughts without digital distraction. It could be committing to a difficult conversation you've been avoiding, willingly stepping into that emotional discomfort to resolve an issue. The specific practice matters less than the underlying intention. To choose for a short time to step outside your comfort zone, not because you have to, but because you can. To prove to yourself that you are more adaptable, more durable, and more capable than your avoiding instincts might lead you to believe. This is how we move philosophy from the pages of a book into the laboratory of our own lives, actively engineering a mind that is not just theoretically resilient, but provenly so. This critical distinction between a reactive impulse and a mindful response is perhaps the most practical and immediate application of all the Stoic principles we've explored so far. It represents the difference between being a puppet whose strings are pulled by every external event and being the puppeteer who consciously decides how to move. A reactive impulse is that immediate, visceral, and often unhelpful jerk of emotion and action, the sharp words spoken in anger, the panicked decision made in fear, the defensive posture adopted at the first sign of criticism. It is automatic, primal, and happens to us. A mindful response, on the other hand, is a chosen, deliberate action. It is the product of that precious gap of awareness we create using the tools of cognitive distancing and the discipline of assent. It is behavior that comes from us, aligned with our deepest values and long-term goals, rather than being a mere reflex to a trigger. The entire Stoic project can be seen as an effort to widen that gap between stimulus and response, to transform that tiny sliver of space from a nearly imperceptible flash into a vast landscape of possibility where our reason and virtue can take root and guide us. The power of this pause, this intentional space, was not lost on the Stoics. Epictetus, whose teachings consistently returned to the theme of personal agency, offered incredibly clear guidance on this very point. He instructed his students, "Don't let the force of an impression when it first hits you knock you off your feet. Just say to it, 'Hold on a moment. Let me see who you are and what you represent. Let me put you to the test.'" This is the essence of mindful response. It is the mental equivalent of catching a ball instead of letting it hit you in the face. You see it coming, you register its speed and trajectory, and you choose to intercept it and hold it for examination before you decide what to do with it. That simple act of saying, "Hold on a moment," is where our freedom lies. It is the difference between a life lived at the mercy of every passing impression and a life lived under the command of a wise and discerning self. Let's make this tangible with a scenario that is all too familiar in our modern, connected world. You're wrapping up your workday, feeling a sense of accomplishment when a new email notification pops up. You open it to find a message from a colleague or, even more stressfully, a client. The tone is harsh, accusatory, and publicly copies several other people. It criticizes an aspect of your work, perhaps unfairly or based on a misunderstanding. The reactive impulse is instantaneous. Your heart starts pounding. Your face flushes with heat. A surge of anger and defensiveness courses through you. Your fingers fly to the keyboard, poised to fire off a reply that matches their tone, to defend your honor, to set the record straight immediately and pointedly. This is the automatic fight-or-flight system taking over, and if you let it, it will type that email for you, creating a cascade of professional damage and personal regret. Now apply the Stoic pause. You feel that initial surge, but you remember Epictetus. You literally say to yourself, hold on a moment. You close the email tab. You stand up and walk away from your computer. You might get a glass of water, take 10 deep breaths, or look out the window for a few minutes. You have created space. In that space, your higher brain functions come back online. You can now assess the impression, the angry email, objectively. You can ask the questions Epictetus recommended. What does this truly represent? Is the criticism valid in any part? What is the most virtuous and effective way to handle this? Instead of reacting from a place of wounded ego, you can now choose to respond from a place of professional poise. Perhaps your response, crafted after this pause, acknowledges their frustration without admitting to a fault you didn't commit. It suggests a calm conversation to clarify the misunderstanding. It is measured, constructive, and ultimately de-escalates the situation. The event was the same, but the outcome is entirely different because you navigated the gap between impulse and action with intention. This practice transforms potential conflicts into opportunities for demonstrating character. It turns moments of high stress into proofs of your own growth. Every time you successfully widen that gap, you are not just solving an immediate problem. You are reinforcing a neural pathway of patience and self-command, making it easier to access that space the next time a trigger appears. So consider your own life for a moment. In the past week, how many of your actions were truly chosen responses, and how many were automatic reactions? How often did you feel that you were consciously steering the ship, versus feeling that the ship was being tossed by every wave and wind? The beauty of this Stoic practice is that you can begin this very second. The next time a minor irritation arises, a spilled coffee, a disrespectful comment, a sudden change of plans, see if you can catch yourself in that microscopic moment before the reaction fully forms. Don't try to stop it, just observe it, and in that observation you will find the first flicker of your freedom, the first step in engineering a mind that responds instead of reacts. This brings us to a principle that is often misunderstood, but is absolutely central to the Stoic path to peace, the art of non-attachment. It is crucial to clarify right from the start that Stoic non-attachment is not a cold, emotionless indifference to the world or the people in it. It is not about becoming a detached, uncaring spectator to your own life. Rather, it is about cultivating a profound sense of inner freedom by releasing our desperate, white-knuckled grip on external outcomes, possessions, and circumstances as the primary sources of our happiness and self-worth. The Stoics observed that our greatest suffering arises not from the events of our lives themselves, but from our attachments to them, our belief that we must have a specific result, own a certain object, or receive a particular validation in order to be okay. Non-attachment, then, is the practice of disentangling our inner state from these external conditions. It is about enjoying the world without becoming enslaved by it, about participating fully in life while understanding that our ultimate peace cannot be contingent on things that are inherently transient and ultimately outside our control. Marcus Aurelius, in his private meditations, constantly returned to this theme of impermanence as the ultimate argument for non-attachment. He wrote, "Keep in mind how fast things pass by and are gone, those that are now and those to come. Existence flows past us like a river. The infinite behind us is closed. The abyss of the future is gaping. What is there in all this that is worth clinging to?" This is not a morbid or depressing thought. It is a liberating dose of reality. He is inviting us to see the world as it truly is, in a constant state of flux. Everything is passing, the good, the bad, the cherished, the feared. To cling to any of it, to desperately try to freeze a moment or possess an object as if it were permanent, is to set ourselves up for inevitable pain. The object will break, the moment will end, the person will change. Non-attachment is the wisdom of holding things lightly, of appreciating them deeply while they are here, but also holding them with an open hand, ready to let them go when the time comes, as it always does. Consider a modern, everyday example that nearly everyone can relate to. Imagine you have a cherished material possession, perhaps a piece of jewelry passed down through your family, a sophisticated watch you saved for years to buy, or even the latest smartphone that feels like an extension of yourself. For a while, this object brings you pleasure and a sense of identity. Then, one day, it is gone. Maybe it is stolen, or you simply lose it. The initial reaction is often a sharp pang of loss, a feeling of violation, or a deep frustration. But if you sit with that feeling and unpack it, you might discover something revealing. The pain is not actually about the object itself, the specific arrangement of metal, glass, and circuitry. The pain comes from the story you attached to that object. It represented a connection to your family, a symbol of your hard work and success, or a tool that kept you connected to your social world. You believed on some level that this external thing was a part of you, and its absence feels like a loss of self. The practice of non-attachment is the process of gently challenging that belief. It is realizing that your connection to your family resides in your memory and your love, not in a physical ring. Your success is evidenced by your skills and your character, not by a watch. Your social connections are built on mutual care, not on a device. The object was a temporary vessel for a value that actually exists independently within you. Losing the object is an inconvenience, but it cannot take what is truly yours. This shift in perspective is where we find our freedom. When we are not attached to a specific outcome for a job interview, we can perform with more authentic confidence, free from the desperate need for approval. When we are not attached to a particular vision of how our vacation must go, we can adapt to a flight delay with humor and curiosity rather than rage. When we are not attached to our children behaving perfectly in public, we can guide them with patience rather than being controlled by our own embarrassment. Non-attachment allows us to engage with the world from a place of abundance rather than scarcity, from choice rather than need. It is the difference between saying, "I enjoy my comfortable lifestyle," and saying, "I must have this comfortable lifestyle to be happy." The first statement comes from a free person, the second comes from a prisoner of circumstance. So let's turn this inward for a moment. Where in your own life might you be holding on a little too tightly? What external thing, outcome, or circumstance have you, perhaps unconsciously, made a prerequisite for your own peace of mind? Is it a certain number in your bank account, the approval of a particular person, the dream of a specific kind of relationship, the possession of a home or a car? The maintenance of a particular reputation? See if you can identify one attachment and then gently question it. Ask yourself, if I were to lose this, who would I be? What would remain? You might find that the answer is not a void, but a resilient, capable, and fundamentally complete self that has been there all along, quietly waiting for you to stop looking for your value in things that can be taken away. This is the ultimate goal of the art of non-attachment, not to own nothing, but to let nothing own you. This profound shift in focus from the external to the internal brings us to one of the most beautiful and often overlooked dimensions of Stoicism, its unique understanding of joy and human flourishing. While the philosophy is frequently associated with enduring hardship and managing negative emotions, its ultimate goal is actually the achievement of a deep, resilient, and unshakable state of fulfillment known as Eudaimonia. This ancient Greek concept, central to Stoic thought, is often translated as happiness, but that modern word doesn't quite capture its full meaning. Eudaimonia is better understood as human flourishing or a life well lived. It is not a fleeting feeling of pleasure or a momentary spike of excitement, but a profound and lasting sense of contentment that arises from within, born from the knowledge that you are living in accordance with your highest nature, that you are acting with virtue, reason, and moral excellence regardless of the circumstances swirling around you. For the Stoics, this was the only true good. Everything else, wealth, fame, comfort, even health, they classified as preferred indifference. They are nice to have if they are present, but they are not necessary for and cannot themselves produce a good life. A life of eudaimonia is built from the materials of our own character, and that is something no external event can ever take away from us. The Stoic philosopher Seneca, who navigated the extreme highs and lows of Roman politics and wealth, wrote extensively on this very subject, drawing a clear distinction between the shallow happiness that depends on fortune and the deep joy that comes from virtue. He stated, "The happy man is not he whom the crowd deems happy, but he who deems himself so." This is a radical and empowering idea. Seneca is telling us that the wise person's joy is self-validating. It does not require the applause of others, the acquisition of a new possession, or the perfect alignment of external stars. It is a quiet, internal verdict. It is the satisfaction that comes from looking back on your day and knowing that you acted with integrity when it was difficult, that you chose kindness when you were tempted toward anger, that you exercised courage in the face of fear. This is a joy that is earned, not found. It is constructed through 1,000 small choices, not stumbled upon by luck. It is, therefore, a joy that cannot be easily lost, because its source is not out there in the unpredictable world, but in here, in the one thing that is always and truly yours, your moral purpose. To see how this works in a real-world context, imagine two different people facing the same professional setback. Let's say a project they both worked on for months is suddenly cancelled by upper management. The first person has built their sense of worth and happiness entirely on external validation and success. Their joy was contingent on the project's launch, the potential promotion, the recognition from their peers. For them, this cancellation is devastating. It feels like a personal failure. Their happiness, which was tied to an outcome, evaporates instantly, leaving behind emptiness, anxiety, and a crisis of confidence. Now consider the second person who strives for a stoic sense of eudaimonia. They too are disappointed. They invested time and effort and believed in the project. However, their primary source of satisfaction was not the outcome itself, but the quality of their effort along the way. They can look back and feel a genuine sense of joy and pride in how they conducted themselves, the creativity they brought to the brainstorming sessions, the collaboration they fostered with their teammates, the integrity with which they handled the budget, the diligence they showed in their research. The cancellation of the project cannot erase those inner accomplishments. Their virtue, their excellent effort remains intact. Therefore, while they may feel the natural sting of a plan gone awry, their core sense of fulfillment remains unshaken. They can quickly regroup, learn from the experience, and channel their energy into a new endeavor, because their well-being was never mortgaged to a specific result in the first place. This understanding of joy reframes our entire pursuit of happiness. We spend so much of our lives on a hedonic treadmill, chasing the next thing we believe will make us happy: a new car, a bigger house, a more prestigious job title. And while these things may provide a temporary thrill, the novelty always fades, forcing us to start running after the next thing. Stoic joy, or eudaimonia, invites us to step off that exhausting treadmill. It asks us to redirect our energy inward, to invest in the one project that offers guaranteed returns, the development of our own character. The joy that comes from consciously choosing patience in a long queue, from offering generosity when it's not expected, or from speaking honestly when it would be easier to lie. These are small but potent deposits into an inner bank of contentment that no market crash can ever deplete. So let's turn this concept into a moment of personal reflection. Take a brief inventory of your own experiences with happiness. When you think about the things that typically bring you joy, how many of them are dependent on external conditions, on something you acquired, achieved, or received from someone else? And how many are generated from within, from a feeling of pride in how you handled a difficult situation, from the quiet satisfaction of doing the right thing, or from the simple peace of a mind that is not at war with reality? This isn't to say we shouldn't enjoy the pleasant gifts life offers us, but it does invite us to reconsider where we place our primary investment for a fulfilling life. Are we relying on the fickle stock market of external events, or are we building the unshakable foundation of inner virtue? The choice determines whether our joy is a temporary visitor or a permanent resident of our soul. Building upon this foundation of inner-derived joy, we now turn to one of the most common and piercing challenges to our equanimity, the experience of criticism and the opinions of others. In a world increasingly connected through social media and instant communication, we are more exposed than ever to the judgments, critiques, and sometimes outright hostility of people we may not even know. The Stoic approach to this universal human experience is not to build a wall of arrogance or indifference, but to develop a profound sense of internal stability that allows us to receive feedback without being derailed by it, and to endure malice without being poisoned by it. They aim to remain undisturbed not because they thought they were perfect, but because they had a clear understanding of what was truly theirs to manage and what belonged to others. The Stoic teacher Epictetus, whose life was a testament to overcoming the lowest social status to achieve philosophical greatness, provided what is perhaps the most straightforward and powerful guidance on this matter. He wrote, "If someone tells you that so and so is speaking ill of you, don't defend yourself against what was said, but reply, yes, and he doesn't know the half of it because he would have mentioned these other defects too if he had known about them." This is more than just witty self-deprecation. It is a profound psychological tactic. Epictetus is advising us to completely disarm the critic by agreeing with them, even exaggerating their point. By doing so, you accomplish two things instantly. First, you demonstrate to yourself that you are not attached to a flawless self-image. You can acknowledge your imperfections without your ego crumbling. Second, you completely rob the critic of their power to shock or hurt you. They came to deliver a blow, and you have responded with a gracious nod, showing that their opinion simply does not control your self-assessment. In another passage, he gets even more direct. If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, "He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone." The core idea is that the words and opinions of others are external events belonging to the category of things not within our control. They are actions taken by another person, and we have no more command over them than we do over the weather. Our only domain is our judgment of those words and our subsequent response. Let's translate this ancient wisdom into a scenario that is agonizingly familiar in the digital age. You pour your heart and expertise into creating something, a video, a blog post, a piece of art, a business proposal, and you share it online. The majority of the feedback is positive, but there, sitting prominently in the comments or the replies, is a string of harsh criticism. It might be a personal attack, a dismissal of your work as worthless, or a cruel joke made at your expense. The reactive impulse is visceral. Your stomach tightens. You feel a hot flush of anger or a cold wave of insecurity. the urge to fire back a defensive, equally sharp retort is overwhelming. You might find yourself obsessively rereading the comment, dissecting it, and perhaps even internalizing it, allowing this single negative voice to drown out 100 positive ones. This is where the Stoic practice becomes a vital lifeline. Instead of reacting, you pause. You remember that this comment is an external event, an action taken by someone else that is entirely outside your control. You apply the discipline of assent and refuse to immediately agree with the negative story it might suggest about you. You can then choose your response from a place of principle, not emotion. One option following Epictetus is to simply not engage at all, recognizing that a heated online argument is rarely productive and almost always corrosive to your own peace. Another option is to view the criticism through the lens of potential utility. You can ask with genuine curiosity, is there any truth in this, however poorly delivered, that I can use to improve? If so, you can extract that valuable nugget and discard the hostile packaging. If there is no utility, you can simply dismiss it as irrelevant noise, the mental equivalent of static on a radio channel. The key is that your sense of self-worth remains anchored internally, in your own knowledge of your effort and your intentions, rather than being tossed about by the unpredictable waves of external approval and disapproval. This practice transforms criticism from a threat into, at worst, a harmless occurrence and at best, a potential teacher. It allows you to navigate the world with a lighter step, unburdened by the exhausting need to manage everyone's opinion of you. So take a moment to reflect on your own relationship with criticism. How do you typically respond when you feel judged or attacked? Do you find yourself crafting elaborate defenses in your mind, seeking validation from others to counter the negative voice, or perhaps ruminating on it for days? What might shift if you began to see every piece of criticism, fair or unfair, as an opportunity to practice the Stoic art of equanimity, an opportunity to reaffirm that your worth is not a commodity to be rated by others, but a fortress built from within, brick by brick, through your own virtuous actions and clear judgments? This practice of managing our reactions and refining our character throughout the day naturally leads us to one of the most practical and transformative Stoic habits, the evening review. Think of this not as a chore or a self-critical audit, but as a daily debrief for the soul, a quiet, intentional period at the end of the day where you step out of the stream of life for a few moments to calmly observe its currents. The Stoics understood that wisdom isn't just accumulated in grand, philosophical moments. It is forged in the countless small choices and reactions that make up our daily existence. Without reflection, these moments simply slip away into the past, their lessons lost. The evening review is the tool that captures those lessons, allowing us to consciously learn from our experiences and deliberately engineer a wiser, more virtuous self for the days to come. The Roman philosopher Seneca was a powerful advocate for this practice, and he wrote about it with compelling clarity in his moral letters to Lucilius. He described his own nightly ritual, saying, "When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, aware of this habit that's now become hers, I examine my entire day and go back over what I've done and said. I hide nothing from myself, I pass nothing by." This is a beautiful and intimate picture of Stoicism in action. Seneca isn't engaging in a grand, dramatic exercise. He is simply sitting in the quiet dark, honestly and gently replaying the tape of his day. He continues, explaining the purpose. "For why should I fear any consequence from my mistakes when I'm able to say, 'See that you don't do that again, but now I forgive you'?" This reveals the true spirit of the practice. It is not about self-flagellation or dwelling on failures with guilt. It is about compassionate, objective observation for the sole purpose of growth. It is the act of becoming your own wisest teacher and most supportive coach, identifying where you strayed from your principles not to punish yourself, but to gently guide yourself back on course for tomorrow. So how can we translate this ancient habit into a simple, modern practice that doesn't feel overwhelming? The key is to avoid turning it into a lengthy, burdensome journaling session that you'll eventually abandon. Instead, focus on 3 powerful, Stoic-inspired questions that cut straight to the heart of the matter. The first question is, what did I truly control today? This brings us right back to the foundational dichotomy of control. As you review your day, you'll likely find that you spent a significant amount of emotional energy on things outside your command. A colleague's bad mood, a traffic delay, the weather, the outcome of a project. Simply acknowledging this can be a profound relief, a nightly ritual of mentally handing back all those burdens that were never yours to carry in the first place. The second question is, how did I respond to challenges? This is where we apply the discipline of assent and examine the gap between impulse and action. Don't just note what happened, focus on your reactions. Did you receive some criticism and immediately become defensive? Or were you able to pause and see if there was useful feedback hidden within it? Did a minor inconvenience send you into a spiral of frustration? Or were you able to meet it with adaptability and humor? This isn't about judging yourself harshly, it's about gathering data on your own patterns. It's like a football coach watching game tape. You're identifying plays that worked and plays that didn't, so you can adjust the strategy for next time. The third and final question is, what is one lesson I can learn? This is the forward-looking element that transforms reflection from a passive activity into an active tool for growth. The lesson might be about yourself. I learned that I'm most prone to irritability when I skip my morning quiet time. Or it might be a broader philosophical insight. I was reminded today that no amount of worrying can change a future outcome. This single, crystallized takeaway is what you carry forward with you, a small but solid brick added to the foundation of your character. The invitation here is not to make a lifelong commitment, but to begin a simple, one-week experiment. For the next 7 days, set aside just 5 to 10 minutes before you go to sleep. Find a quiet space, close your eyes, and walk through your day with these 3 questions as your guide. You can think about them, or you can write a few brief notes in a journal. The medium matters less than the intentionality. After this week, take a moment to observe any subtle shifts. Do you find yourself becoming more aware of your reactions in the moment, simply because you know you'll be reflecting on them later? Has the practice of mentally handing back what you can't control begun to lighten your emotional load? You may discover that this nightly conversation with yourself becomes the most valuable part of your day, a quiet sanctuary where you actively participate in the beautiful, ongoing project of building a non-reactive mind. This brings us to a virtue that is both incredibly simple to understand and remarkably difficult to master, yet it is absolutely essential for a tranquil mind: the cultivation of patience. In our hyper-connected, on-demand world, patience can feel like a relic from a slower time, an unnecessary virtue when so much is available at the tap of a screen. But the Stoics saw it very differently. They viewed patience not as passive waiting, but as an active, intelligent acceptance of the natural rhythms of life and the inevitable delays that are woven into the fabric of existence. It is the conscious decision to relinquish our demand for immediacy and to align our expectations with reality, thereby dissolving the friction that causes so much of our daily irritation and frustration. Patience is the practical application of the dichotomy of control to the dimension of time. It is the recognition that the pace of events, the actions of others, and the unfolding of processes are largely outside our command, and that our peace of mind depends on making peace with that fact. The Stoic emperor Marcus Aurelius, a man who bore the immense weight of governing a vast empire where news traveled slowly and outcomes were uncertain for months at a time, frequently turned to the necessity of patience in his private writings. He offered this gentle, powerful reminder to himself: accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart. And in another passage, he gets even more direct about the source of our irritation, writing, "How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it." In these words, we see the Stoic blueprint for patience. It is not gritting your teeth and enduring something unpleasant. It is a wholehearted acceptance of the present moment, including its delays and its frustrating people, understanding that resisting what is already happening only adds a layer of self-inflicted suffering on top of the original inconvenience. The delay itself is neutral. Our impatience is the poison we choose to drink while waiting for it to pass. Let's take a universally relatable scenario: waiting in a long, slow-moving line. Perhaps you're at the grocery store with a cart full of perishables, or you're stuck in standstill traffic when you're already late for an appointment. The initial trigger is the same for everyone. Your progress toward a goal has been impeded. The reactive, impatient response is all too familiar. Your body tenses up. You sigh heavily. You constantly check your watch or the clock on your dashboard, each second feeling like a personal affront. You might mentally criticize the cashier for being too slow or rage at the city's traffic management. This internal storm of frustration is incredibly draining, and it often leads to external actions like making a rude comment or driving aggressively that only make the situation worse for everyone, including yourself. Now apply the Stoic lens of patience. The first step is to apply the dichotomy of control. Ask yourself, is this delay within my control? In almost every case, the answer is a resounding no. You cannot make the line move faster. You cannot magically clear the traffic jam. These are external events. What is within your control? Your judgment of the situation and your response to it. This is where patience becomes an active practice. Instead of fighting against the reality of the delay, you accept it fully. You stop mentally arguing with what is already true. Then you reclaim the wasted time. That long line becomes an opportunity to practice mindfulness, to notice your breath, to observe the details of your surroundings without judgment, or to simply enjoy a few minutes of uninterrupted stillness in a busy day. The traffic jam becomes a chance to listen to an entire chapter of an audiobook or to have a meaningful conversation with a passenger. By shifting your judgment of the event from a waste of my precious time to an unexpected pocket of time I can use, you transform the experience entirely. The delay hasn't changed, but your relationship with it has, and in that shift, impatience evaporates, replaced by a calm, purposeful presence. This practice extends far beyond lines and traffic. It applies to the slow progress of a personal goal, the frustrating behavior of a loved one who isn't changing as quickly as we'd like, or the seemingly slow unfolding of a career path. Impatience is the suffering we add to these situations by demanding that they conform to our personal timeline. Stoic patience is the wisdom to understand that everything, people, projects, healing, growth operates on its own schedule, according to its own nature. Our job is not to force the river to flow faster, but to flow with it, using the journey itself for our development. So consider your own life for a moment. Where is impatience currently chipping away at your peace? Is it while waiting for a response to an important message? Is it with a family member who repeats the same pattern you wish they would break? Is it with your own pace of learning a new skill, Identify that hotspot, and the next time it flares up, see if you can meet it not with resistance, but with a conscious, deep breath of acceptance. See if you can find the hidden gift in the waiting, the small space it creates for you to practice being the calm, resilient person you aspire to be, regardless of how slowly the world around you seems to be moving. Now, if patience helps us accept the natural pace of life, the practice of gratitude is what allows us to truly appreciate its texture, even and especially when that texture is rough. In the Stoic framework, gratitude is not merely a passive feeling of thankfulness for the good things that come our way. It is something far more active and robust, a deliberate and conscious recognition of the benefit or lesson inherent in every single circumstance, including those we would typically label as misfortunes. For the Stoics, this wasn't about putting on a pair of rose-colored glasses and pretending that challenges aren't difficult. It was about training the mind to consistently seek out and focus on what we have, what we gain, and what we learn, rather than passively dwelling on what we lack or what we've lost. This active recognition is a powerful tool for maintaining perspective and cultivating a deep, enduring sense of contentment that is not contingent on external conditions being perfect. The Stoic teacher Epictetus, who knew profound personal limitation, gave us perhaps the most direct instruction on this matter. He advised, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." This simple statement contains a revolutionary shift in focus. It moves us from a mindset of scarcity, where our attention is constantly scanning the horizon for what's missing, to a mindset of abundance, where we are actively taking inventory of the assets already present in our lives. Epictetus is not telling us to ignore our desires for improvement, but he is insisting that we cannot find peace if we make our contentment conditional upon fulfilling those desires first. True contentment is found in the present moment appreciation of what is already here, right now. To understand how this works in practice, let's consider a difficult experience that could easily be framed as purely negative. Imagine you go through a painful breakup. The immediate, raw emotions are grief, loneliness, and perhaps a sense of failure. It would be unnatural and un-stoic to try and suppress those feelings. However, once you have allowed yourself to feel them, the practice of active gratitude begins. This is where you consciously shift your focus from what was lost to what remains and what was gained. You might feel gratitude for the time you had together and the lessons you learned about yourself and relationships. You might feel gratitude for the friends who support you through the pain, whose value becomes even more apparent. You might even feel a strange sense of gratitude for the pain itself, because it is a clear sign that you care deeply and that you have the capacity for love. Most importantly, you can feel gratitude for the newfound freedom and opportunity to rediscover yourself and to eventually build a new, healthier relationship armed with the wisdom from the past. This doesn't erase the hurt, but it surrounds it with a context of meaning and growth. The event is reframed. It is no longer just a loss. It is also a complex package containing gifts of insight, resilience, and clarity. This practice is the ultimate antidote to the human tendency toward hedonic adaptation, that phenomenon where we quickly get used to positive changes in our lives and then take them for granted, constantly needing the next new thing to feel happy again. Active gratitude is the deliberate effort to short-circuit that cycle. It's the daily mental exercise of reappreciating the fundamental gifts we already possess. The functioning of our bodies, the roof over our heads, the clean water from our tap, the simple beauty of a sunset, or the comfort of a warm bed. The Stoics would remind us that these are not guaranteed. By consciously recognizing them each day, we not only generate immediate feelings of contentment, but also build a FORTI, FIED, Chinese letter of positive perspective that we can draw upon when genuine hardship strikes. It becomes much harder to be completely derailed by a bad day at work when you are actively and habitually grateful for the job itself, for the ability to work, and for the income it provides. So let's make this tangible right now. This isn't just a concept to understand, it's a muscle to be exercised. The invitation is to pause for a moment, either mentally or by actually grabbing a notepad and make a list. But not just any list. I want you to list 3 specific things you are genuinely grateful for at this very moment. And here is the crucial Stoic twist. Make sure that at least one of those 3 things is a current challenge or difficulty you are facing. It could be a stressful project at work that is teaching you perseverance. It could be a personal conflict that is forcing you to practice patience and better communication. It could even be a physical limitation that is teaching you to appreciate the abilities you still have. By intentionally including a challenge, you are actively practicing the Stoic art of Amorfati, loving your fate. You are not saying the challenge is fun or easy. You are recognizing it as your necessary and beneficial curriculum for growth. This simple act, repeated daily, can fundamentally rewire your default perspective, training you to automatically seek the value in all of life's moments and building an unshakable foundation of contentment that rests not on what you have but on how you see. Of all the emotions that can storm the fortress of our inner peace, anger often arrives with the most sudden and destructive force. The Stoics, with their unwavering commitment to a life governed by reason, viewed anger not as a justified passion but as a temporary form of madness, a brief insanity that seizes control and leads us to act in ways that are entirely contrary to our own virtue and long-term well-being. Seneca, perhaps the most prolific Stoic writer on the subject, dedicated an entire volume to it, his work On Anger, standing as a powerful and timeless dissection of this corrosive emotion. He didn't mince words, describing anger as plenty of ruin and the most hideous and frenzied of all the emotions. He saw it as a voluntary slavery, a state where we are so completely overpowered that we become strangers to ourselves, capable of saying and doing things we would never condense in a calm moment. For the Stoics, reason was our highest faculty, our divine spark, and anger was its absolute antithesis, a fire that burns down the very house of our character. Seneca's writings provide us with a practical roadmap for managing this inner fire before it can rage out of control. The first and most crucial technique is the simplest to understand and the most difficult to master: the deliberate delay. At the very first spark of anger, the instruction is to impose a mandatory pause. Do not act, do not speak, do not even decide in that initial heated moment. Seneca advises the greatest remedy for anger is delay. This is not passive, it is an intensely active form of self-command. By forcing a space between the provocation and your response, you allow the initial, white-hot surge of adrenaline to subside, creating an opening for your rational mind to re-engage. This pause might be a single deep breath, counting slowly to 10, or physically removing yourself from the situation. The goal is to break the automatic circuit that connects a trigger to an explosive reaction. Once you have created that vital space through delay, the next Stoic technique is to subject the entire provocation to a cold, objective examination. This is where cognitive distancing is applied directly to the source of our fury. Seneca urges us to question the story we are telling ourselves about the event. Was the offense intentional, or could it have been a simple mistake or an accident? How important is this issue in the grand scheme of your life, or even your week? Is your angry response proportionate to the actual event, or is it being fueled by other, unrelated frustrations? Often when we apply this objective lens, we find that our anger is built on a foundation of assumptions and misinterpretations that crumble under rational scrutiny. The person who cut you off in traffic wasn't necessarily a malicious jerk. They might be a distracted parent rushing to a sick child or someone who simply didn't see you. This isn't about making excuses for others. It's about freeing yourself from the unnecessary suffering of a flawed narrative. Let's bring this to life with the classic modern scenario of road rage. You're driving calmly along when another car suddenly swerves into your lane without signaling, forcing you to slam on your brakes. The reactive impulse is instantaneous. A jolt of fear instantly transforms into boiling anger. Your heart hammers, your grip tightens on the wheel, and a stream of insults floods your mind. The ancient, primal part of your brain is screaming for retaliation, to honk aggressively, to tailgate, to gesture rudely. This is the madness Seneca describes. Now apply the Stoic pause. Instead of immediately acting on that impulse, you take one deep, intentional breath. In that tiny window of space, you engage your reason. You objectively examine the event. No collision occurred, both cars are fine, and you have no idea what is happening in the other driver's car or life. You cognitively reframe the situation. This isn't a personal attack. It's a common occurrence on busy roads, a potential mistake by a fallible human being just like you. From this calmer perspective, the desire for retaliation simply evaporates, replaced by a sense of relief that everyone is safe, and a decision to simply create more space for yourself. You have not been weak, you have been strong. You have chosen the difficult path of self-mastery over the easy path of primal reaction. This practice of managing anger through reason is ultimately about preventing the deep regret that so often follows in anger's wake. How many fractured relationships, ill-considered words, and professional missteps have originated from a moment of unchecked fury that we would give anything to take back? The Stoic approach is prophylactic. It seeks to prevent the wound rather than treat the scar. It asks us to prioritize our long-term character and peace over the short-term, illusory satisfaction of an angry outburst. So take a moment for an honest personal audit. Reflect on your own experiences. Can you recall a time when anger led you to say or do something you profoundly regretted? How might the outcome have differed if you had been able to invoke that crucial pause, to subject the provocation to the cool light of reason before choosing your response? The power to make that different choice next time lies entirely within your capacity to see anger for what it is, not a tool for justice, but a temporary madness that reason alone can cure. Now, if our inner work has been about building a fortress of personal resilience, it's crucial to understand that this fortress was never meant to be an isolated castle. A common misconception about Stoicism is that it promotes a kind of solitary, self-sufficient isolation, a life where the wise person retreats from the world to tend to their own garden of virtue, untouched by the messiness of human relationships. Nothing could be further from the Stoic ideal. In fact, the philosophy is deeply and profoundly social. The Stoics saw human beings as inherently connected, part of a vast, interconnected web of mutual obligation and care. They believed that our personal resilience, our inner citadel, finds its highest expression and its deepest purpose not in withdrawal, but in active, virtuous engagement with our community. Our duty to others isn't a distraction from our philosophical journey. It is the very terrain on which that journey takes place. It is in our roles as friends, family members, colleagues, and citizens that we get to practice and prove our virtue every single day. This concept of interconnected duty was a central pillar for the Stoic emperor Marcus Aurelius, who arguably had more worldly responsibilities than almost any philosopher in history. He constantly reminded himself of this truth in his private meditations, writing, What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee. This is a stunningly concise metaphor for the Stoic view of society. The individual, the bee, cannot truly flourish at the expense of the hive, the community. Our well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of the whole. He expands on this idea with even more directness, urging himself to remember that we were born to work together like feet, hands, and eyes, like the two rows of teeth, upper and lower. To obstruct each other is unnatural. To feel anger at someone, to turn your back on them, that is obstructive. For Marcus, refusing to help, to collaborate, or to fulfill our social roles wasn't just a personal choice. It was a violation of our fundamental nature as human beings designed for cooperation. Our duty to contribute is written into our very biology. Let's bring this ancient principle into a modern context that many will find familiar. Imagine you've had an intensely difficult day. You're grappling with a significant personal stress, perhaps a worrying health diagnosis, a conflict in your family, or a looming financial pressure. Your energy is depleted, your emotional reserves are running on empty, and all you want to do is retreat, to shut the world out and tend to your own wounds. As you're packing up to leave, a colleague approaches your desk. They look overwhelmed and anxious. A critical deadline they're responsible for has been moved up, and they desperately need your expertise to help them restructure their part of the project. The reactive, self-focused impulse is to politely or not so politely decline, to say you have too much on your own plate, that it's not your problem, that you need to focus on your own well-being. And from a purely self-preservation standpoint, that reaction is completely understandable, but the Stoic path invites a different response. It asks you to pause and consider your role. You are not just an individual with private problems. You are a member of a team, a colleague, a professional with a certain skill set. Fulfilling that role with virtue, even when it's personally inconvenient, is the practice. It is the application of courage, justice, and kindness in a real-world situation. So you take a deep breath, you set aside your own preoccupations for an hour, and you sit down to help. You don't do it with resentment or a sense of martyrdom, but with the understanding that this action is an expression of your character. And here's the beautiful, almost paradoxical Stoic secret. This act of turning outward to help another person often becomes the very thing that restores your own emotional stability. The intense focus required to solve someone else's problem forces you out of the endless, looping cycle of your own anxious thoughts. The sense of genuine connection and competence you feel from being useful can counteract feelings of helplessness sparked by your personal struggles. By fulfilling your duty to your community, you don't drain your resilience, you paradoxically replenish it. You are reminded that you are capable, needed, and connected, antidotes to the isolation that personal crises so often breed. This principle extends far beyond the office. It applies to our duty to our family, to our friends, to our neighbors, and to our broader civic community. Checking in on an elderly relative, listening patiently to a friend going through a hard time, volunteering for a local cause, even just performing a small act of kindness for a stranger, these are not distractions from the pursuit of a good life. They are the constituent parts of it. Each time we choose to act for the benefit of the whole, we strengthen the muscles of our character, and we weave ourselves more firmly into the network of mutual support that ultimately sustains us all. Our personal resilience and our social duty are not in opposition. They are two sides of the same coin. A resilient person is better able to fulfill their duties, and a person who actively fulfills their duties builds a deeper, more meaningful resilience. So take a moment to reflect on the various communities you belong to, your family, your workplace, your circle of friends, your city. In which of these roles have you been showing up fully, and where might you be holding back, perhaps using your own personal challenges as a reason to withdraw? How might leaning into your duty, not as a burden but as a practice ground for your virtue, actually become a source of strength and stability for you, even in the midst of your own storms? This profound understanding of our social nature and the strength we draw from it leads us directly to a principle that can liberate us from a tremendous amount of our underlying anxiety: the full and conscious acceptance of impermanence. If there is one undeniable, non-negotiable law of the universe that the Stoics urged us to not just acknowledge but to fully embrace, it is that everything is in a constant state of change. Nothing remains static. Everything from the grandest mountain to the most fleeting thought arises, exists for a time, and then passes away. The Stoics saw our resistance to this fundamental truth as the root of so much of our suffering. Our fear of loss, our anxiety about the future, our grief over the past, even our desperate attempts to cling to pleasant moments, all of this pain is amplified by our subconscious belief that things should be permanent, that we can somehow freeze the river of existence at a point that pleases us. The practice of accepting impermanence is the mental shift from resisting this flow to learning to swim with it, thereby finding a profound peace that isn't shattered by the inevitable changes life brings. Marcus Aurelius, constantly surrounded by the reminders of Rome's power which itself would one day fade, turned to this truth as a source of comfort, not despair. In his meditations, he offers a powerful visual: keep in mind how fast things pass by and are gone, those that are now and those to come. Existence flows past us like a river. He isn't saying this to make life seem meaningless, but to highlight its preciousness and to free us from the tyranny of clinging. His advice was to remember that we are part of this natural order, not separate from it or exempt from its rules. To fight against change is to fight against nature itself, a battle we are guaranteed to lose, but to accept it is to align ourselves with the deepest reality of existence, and in that alignment we find a strange and powerful stability. The peace comes from knowing that the river will flow, and our job is not to build a dam, but to navigate its currents with grace and awareness. We can see the beautiful evidence of this principle all around us, in the most natural and gentle of cycles. Consider the turning of the seasons. We don't look at a magnificent, fiery autumn tree and weep with despair because we know its leaves will fall. In fact, its beauty is intensified by our knowledge of its temporary nature. We appreciate the crisp air and the golden light precisely because we know it won't last. We don't curse the arrival of winter. We bundle up. We appreciate the stark beauty of a snow-covered landscape, and we understand that beneath the soil, life is resting and preparing for the spring that we know, with certainty, will come again. This is acceptance of impermanence in its purest form. There is no anxiety about the leaves falling because we understand it is natural, necessary, and part of a larger, beautiful cycle. Now, imagine applying that exact same mindset to the other areas of our lives. What if we could look at our own youth, our current health, our possessions, and even our relationships with the same understanding with which we view the autumn leaves? Not with a morbid fixation on loss, but with a deep appreciation for their present beauty precisely because they are temporary. This becomes especially powerful when we consider our relationships. People evolve, friendships shift, children grow up and move away, and loved ones eventually pass on. This is the natural order of things. Our suffering arises when we hold a silent, hidden expectation that a person or a relationship should remain exactly as it is forever. We feel anxiety when our child becomes more independent, not because independence is bad, but because we are clinging to the past version of them. We feel pain when a friendship changes form, not because the new form lacks value, but because we are attached to the old one. Accepting impermanence in relationships means loving people fully and openly in the present moment, without placing the burden of expectation upon them to never change. It allows us to appreciate each phase of a relationship for what it is, rather than mourning what it once was or fearing what it might become. It is the understanding that the very fact that something is fleeting is what makes it so incredibly precious and worthy of our full attention right now. So let's bring this into a practical, personal space. Take a moment to consider your own life. Where are you currently experiencing a low hum of anxiety that is rooted in the fear of change or loss? Is it anxiety about your career path shifting in an uncertain economy? Is it a worry about your parents aging? Is it a subtle fear that a good period in your life cannot last? Now, gently apply the lens of impermanence. Instead of resisting these realities, try to see them as part of the natural, flowing river of existence. Your career will change because all things do. This isn't a personal failure, but a universal law. Your parents aging is a natural process. This awareness can transform your time with them from something tinged with worry into something cherished with profound presence. That good period will indeed change, which is the finest reason imaginable to put down your phone, look around, and soak in every single second of it with gratitude right now. Embracing impermanence doesn't erase life's challenges, but it does dissolve the extra layer of suffering we add by being shocked and angered by them. It is the ultimate practice of living in reality, on reality's terms, and finding a deep and unshakable peace within that truthful, ever-changing flow. This brings us to a virtue that is often glamorized but deeply misunderstood, a quality that sits at the very heart of the Stoic response to life's inevitable challenges: courage. In our common imagination, courage is often pictured as the absence of fear, the fearless hero charging into battle without a second thought or a quiver of doubt. The Stoic definition, however, is far more nuanced, more human, and ultimately more attainable. For them, courage was not the elimination of fear, but the capacity to act rightly in spite of it. It is the judgment that a chosen action, aligned with virtue and reason, is more important than the visceral feeling of apprehension trying to hold you back. A Stoic feels the quickened heartbeat, the tightness in the chest, the primal urge to retreat. They are not immune to these biological signals, but they have trained themselves to recognize these sensations as mere impressions, data points to be considered rather than absolute commands to be obeyed. Courage, then, is the triumph of your considered judgment over your raw, instinctual emotion. It is the decision to move forward because it is the right thing to do, even while every fiber of your being is pulling you in the opposite direction. The Stoics, being eminently practical philosophers, understood that this kind of courage is not something we simply find in a moment of crisis. It is something we must build through deliberate mental preparation. They didn't wait for the storm to hit to learn how to sail. They practiced in calm waters and mentally rehearsed for the hurricane. This preparation involved two key components: the use of reason to dissect the object of our fear, and the unwavering commitment to virtue as our guiding star. First, they would apply reason to fear itself, subjecting it to a cold, logical examination. What exactly am I afraid of? Is this outcome truly within my control? What is the very worst that could happen? And is it as catastrophic as my imagination is making it out to be? Often, this process of questioning alone can shrink a fear down to its true size, revealing it to be a manageable challenge rather than an insurmountable monster. Second, and more importantly, they would anchor themselves to their virtue. The question became not, "Is this scary?" but, "What would a courageous and just person do in this situation?" By making their moral duty the primary focus, the emotion of fear was moved from the driver's seat to the passenger seat. It was still along for the ride, but it was no longer steering. The Stoic teacher Epictetus, who himself faced a life of enslavement and physical hardship, placed this understanding of courage squarely in the realm of our mental judgments. He argued, for it is not death or hardship that is a fearful thing, but the fear of death and hardship. This is a monumental shift in perspective. He is asserting that the true enemy is not the external event itself, but our internal opinion about that event. Our dread, our anxiety, our paralysis, these are not caused by the thing we fear, but by our assent to the judgment that it is terrifying and unbearable. Therefore, bravery is not a mysterious quality bestowed upon a lucky few. It is a matter of correcting a flawed judgment. It is the conscious decision to withdraw our agreement from the thought that says, "This is unbearable," and replace it with the reasoned judgment that I can act with integrity even in this difficult circumstance. Our courage, or lack thereof, is a direct reflection of the judgments we choose to accept. We can find one of the most powerful historical examples of this principle in the final hours of the philosopher Seneca, a towering figure of Stoicism who fell out of favor with the Emperor Nero. When the order for his suicide was delivered, Seneca was faced with the ultimate test of his philosophy. The natural human fear of death and pain was undoubtedly present. Yet accounts from the time, notably from the historian Tacitus, describe a scene not of panic or despair, but of profound calm and purposeful action. Seneca comforted his grieving friends and family, arguing against excessive emotions. When the means of his death, slitting his veins, proved slow and agonizing, he remained composed, continuing to dictate his final thoughts to scribes. He did not display an absence of fear, but a supreme mastery over it. His courage was demonstrated through his actions, his choice to meet his end with rational acceptance, his concern for others even in his own extremity, and his unwavering commitment to his principles until his final breath. He had mentally rehearsed for this moment his entire life, not through morbid obsession, but through the daily practice of philosophy. When the reality arrived, his judgment held firm. His virtue, not his fear, guided his hand. Now, let's bring this profound concept out of the ancient world and into the light of your own life. You are almost certainly not facing a Roman emperor's death sentence, but you are undoubtedly facing your own modern fears. Perhaps it's the fear of having a difficult conversation with your partner about your future. Maybe it's the fear of financial instability if you leave a secure but unfulfilling job to pursue a passion. It could be the fear of social rejection if you choose to be authentically yourself in a new group. Or perhaps it's a more profound fear of failure, of not being enough, of not measuring up. Stoic courage asks you to meet that fear not by trying to wish it away, but by engaging with it rationally and virtuously. First, isolate the fear and examine it. What is the specific outcome you are afraid of? What is within your control to influence that outcome? Often, you'll find the fear is rooted in a future uncertainty that you cannot control. Second, and most crucially, shift your focus from the feared outcome to the virtuous action. Ask yourself not, how can I avoid this fear, but what is the right thing to do here? The courageous action might be to initiate that difficult conversation with honesty and compassion, because that is what a good partner does. It might be to take a calculated risk on your career, because pursuing your potential is a virtuous act of self-respect. It might be to risk being your true self, because living with integrity is more important than living with approval. Your fear doesn't have to disappear for you to act. You simply have to decide that your commitment to acting rightly is more powerful than your desire to retreat into safety. That decision, made again and again in life's small and large moments, is the very practice of building an unshakable Stoic courage. In the midst of a world that constantly demands our attention and reaction, the Stoics discovered a powerful counter-intuitive practice, the deliberate pursuit of silence and solitude. This is not about loneliness or withdrawing from our duties, but about a strategic and periodic withdrawal from the noise of the external world to recalibrate our inner compass. It is a conscious act of creating a sanctuary of quiet where the shouts of the world fade into a whisper, allowing the voice of our own reason to be heard clearly once more. The constant barrage of notifications, opinions, and external stimuli doesn't just distract us, it actively shapes our thoughts and emotions, making us reactive and dependent on the world outside for our sense of self. Solitude, in the Stoic sense, is the essential practice of reclaiming that sovereignty. It is where we strengthen the inner self by reminding it that it is whole and complete on its own, reducing our desperate hunger for external validation and approval that so often leads us astray. The Roman philosopher Seneca, a man who navigated the treacherous and noisy court of Emperor Nero, was a profound advocate for this vital practice. He wrote powerfully about the need to retreat into oneself, stating, "You must retire into yourself as much as you can. Associate with people who are likely to improve you. Welcome those whom you are capable of improving. The process is mutual, for people learn while they teach." But his advice goes further than just choosing good company. It insists on the necessity of time with no company at all. In another letter, he gets to the very heart of the matter, observing, "Nothing is more damaging to the character than to be in a public gathering." Then vices creep in unnoticed. Seneca is pointing out a subtle but critical danger. When we are constantly surrounded by the crowd, we unconsciously begin to absorb its values, its anxieties, its pace, and its judgments. Our own character becomes diluted, and we start to measure our worth by a metric that is not our own. The practice of solitude is the antidote. It is the process of washing away the influence of the crowd to rediscover our own authentic convictions and values. So how do we translate this ancient wisdom into a practical, modern habit? It begins by recognizing that this doesn't require a week-long silent retreat to a remote cabin, though that can be wonderful. The power of this practice is found in its daily, consistent application. It's about carving out a small but sacred pocket of quiet within the chaos of everyday life. This could be as simple as committing to the first 20 minutes of your day without picking up your phone, without turning on the news, without any input at all. Use that time to sit with a cup of tea and simply be with your own thoughts, to meditate or to journal. It could be a deliberate, quiet commute where you drive in silence instead of listening to a podcast, allowing your mind to process and wander instead of being constantly filled. It might be a weekly walk in a natural setting without headphones, where the only sounds are your footsteps and the wind in the trees. The key is intentionality. This is not wasted time, it is invested time. It is the essential maintenance required for the most important tool you possess, your mind. The benefits of this practice directly fuel the Stoic goal of a non-reactive mind. In the silence, we create the space for the cognitive distancing we discussed earlier. Without the constant pull of external triggers, our nervous system downshifts from a state of high alert to one of calm awareness. This is where we process the events of the previous day, not with frantic emotion, but with the calm detachment of a philosopher. We can examine a criticism we received and decide how much weight to give it, rather than carrying the sting of it unconsciously all day. We can rehearse an upcoming challenge and plan our virtuous response, rather than being ambushed by it. This daily quiet time is the training ground where we strengthen the muscle of our inner citadel, ensuring that when we do engage with the world, we do so from a place of centered strength, not from a place of depleted reactivity. We become less like a leaf blown by every wind of opinion and more like a deep-rooted tree, stable and unwavering. Now, take a moment to honestly assess your own life. How much of your day is spent in true, uninterrupted silence, completely free from the consumption of other people's words, ideas, or entertainment? How often do you allow yourself to be truly alone with your own thoughts without immediately reaching for a device to fill the void? It can feel uncomfortable at first, even unsettling, because it forces us to confront ourselves without distraction. But it is in that discomfort that the greatest growth occurs. Imagine how your reactions to daily stressors might shift if you began each day from a place of deep inner calm, having already connected with your own core values and priorities. How might a difficult conversation change if you entered it from a state of centered awareness instead of from a place of scattered, reactive energy? The practice of silence and solitude is not an escape from life. It is the very thing that allows us to engage with life more wisely, more virtuously, and with a profound and unshakable peace. This concept of aligning with nature is perhaps the most elegant synthesis of all the Stoic principles we've explored so far. It's the grand, unifying theme that brings everything together. To live in accordance with nature for the Stoics was the very definition of a good and virtuous life. But what did they mean by this seemingly simple phrase? They were referring to a dual alignment, first, with our own unique human nature, which is our capacity for reason, virtue, and social cooperation, and second, with the broader, universal nature of the cosmos itself, which is characterized by constant change, interconnectedness, and a rational, unfolding order. This isn't about moving to the wilderness or only eating organic food. It is about understanding the fundamental rules of the game of existence and choosing to play in harmony with them, rather than exhausting ourselves by fighting against them. It is the ultimate practice of flowing with the river of life, rather than standing on the bank and screaming at the current for moving too fast. The founder of Stoicism, Zeno of Citium, and his successor, Cleans, both placed this idea at the very center of their philosophy. While their complete works are largely lost, the essence of their teaching has been passed down through other writers. Cleans, in his famous Hymn to Zeus, captures this sentiment of harmonious alignment beautifully, writing, "Lead me, O Zeus, and thou, O destiny, / the way that I am bid by you to go, / to follow I am ready. If I choose not, / I make myself a wretch and still must follow." This is a powerful admission. Cleans is acknowledging a fundamental truth: the universe or nature has its own course. We are already a part of that course, whether we like it or not. Our only choice is whether we will follow willingly, with understanding and grace, or whether we will be dragged kicking and screaming like a petulant child. To align with nature is to choose the former, to willingly and intelligently cooperate with the inevitable, thereby transforming it from a source of suffering into a source of strength and peace. We can see this principle in action in the most practical of modern scenarios. Imagine you have meticulously planned a crucial outdoor event, a wedding, an important team-building retreat, a product launch. The forecast was perfectly clear for weeks, but on the morning of the event, the skies darken and a torrential downpour begins. The person who is not living in accordance with nature will resist this reality with every fiber of their being. They will be consumed by frustration, anger, and a sense of personal victimhood. They will waste immense energy on thoughts like, "This isn't fair, why is this happening to me?" This ruins everything. This resistance is a form of rebellion against universal nature. The weather is a quintessential example of an external event entirely outside our control. The suffering they experience is not caused by the rain, but by their refusal to accept the rain's reality. Now, observe the person who strives to align with nature. They feel the same initial pang of disappointment. They are human, after all. But very quickly, their reason engages. They recognize the rain as a simple fact of the universal nature they are a part of. They accept it fully without complaint. Then they turn to their human nature, their capacity for reason, creativity, and problem-solving. Instead of fighting the rain, they flow with it. They ask, given that it is raining, what is the most virtuous and effective action we can now take? This shift in perspective unlocks a world of possibilities. The wedding moves to a beautiful indoor alternative, perhaps creating an even more intimate atmosphere. The corporate retreat pivots to engaging indoor workshops, strengthening bonds in a new way. The product launch becomes a creative digital event that reaches an even wider audience. By aligning with the nature of the situation, it is raining and applying their own human nature reason. They not only solve the problem but often create an outcome that is better than the original plan. They didn't just endure the change, they collaborated with it. This is the profound difference between passive resignation and active acceptance. Resignation is giving up. Acceptance, in the Stoic sense, is the first and most crucial step toward intelligent action. It is the clear-eyed assessment of reality that allows us to apply our efforts where they will actually make a difference. Aligning with nature means using our reason to discern what is within our power, our judgments and actions, and gracefully accepting what is not, like the weather, the past, or the actions of others. It is the practice of directing your energy like a laser beam toward your own voluntary choices, rather than scattering it like a floodlight against the immovable walls of external events. So let's turn this inward for a moment of genuine reflection. Where in your own life are you currently trying to fight the current? Where are you exhausting yourself by resisting a reality that has already come to pass or a natural process that is simply unfolding? It might be resisting the natural aging process instead of embracing the wisdom of each stage of life. It could be fighting against the end of a relationship that has run its natural course, rather than accepting the closure and looking for the lessons within it. It might be struggling against the natural pace of a creative project, forcing it and becoming frustrated, instead of allowing the ideas to develop and mature in their own time. Consider this an invitation to pause, to look at that specific situation, and to ask yourself a simple but transformative question. If I were to stop fighting this reality and instead choose to flow with it, what intelligent, virtuous, and effective action would become possible? The answer to that question is the very sound of your life coming into harmony with nature. Now, if aligning with nature teaches us to flow with the present moment, we must directly address the single greatest anchor that holds us back from that fluidity, our attachment to the past. The Stoics understood with crystal clarity that the past is, by its very definition, a country we can never return to and can never change. It is a closed book, a finished recording. To spend our precious mental and emotional energy dwelling on it, replaying old mistakes, nursing past wounds, or longing for vanished glory, is not just unproductive, it is an active form of self-sabotage. It is like trying to steer a car by staring intently into the rearview mirror. You will inevitably miss what is right in front of you, and you are almost certain to crash. The Stoic focus was always on the present because that is the only point in time where our agency actually exists. The past is gone, and the future is not yet here. All we ever truly have is this moment, right now, and the past is a phantom that can only haunt us if we choose to keep inviting it into our present moment thinking. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, in his private writings, constantly wrestled with this very human tendency to get lost in what was already done. he offered himself this powerful reminder: don't let the future disturb you. You will meet it with the same weapons of reason and virtue that today guard you against the present. But the past is gone, and its disturbances are gone with it. In this simple yet profound statement, he draws a critical distinction. The future, while uncertain, can be met with the tools we are honing right now. But the past is not just uncertain, it is immutable, it is fixed. The events themselves are over, and more importantly, the emotional disturbances they caused, the anger, the shame, the regret, only continue to exist as echoes in our own mind. We are the ones who keep them alive through the act of recollection and re-judgment. We are, as Marcus might say, scratching at a wound that has already healed on the outside, but that we refuse to let heal on the inside. Let's make this painfully practical with an example almost everyone can relate to. Imagine you gave a public presentation 6 months ago that, in your view, went poorly. Perhaps you stumbled over your words, failed to adequately answer a tough question, or noticed a few audience members looking disengaged. The event itself lasted 1 hour and concluded 6 months ago. It is over, but if you are like most people, you might still find yourself in quiet moments replaying that hour in your mind. You cringe at the memory of your stumble. You feel a fresh wave of heat in your face when you think of the question you fumbled. This mental rumination is the act of taking a perfectly neutral, completed past event and actively choosing to re-inflict its emotional payload upon yourself in the present. You are not being hurt by the past presentation. You are being hurt by your present-day decision to dwell on it. The Stoic approach would be to first accept the past event with total finality. It is done, then you would extract any useful lesson it contained with calm objectivity. Maybe the lesson is, I need to practice handling difficult questions more, or I should simplify that particular slide. You take that lesson, you thank the past for providing it, and then you consciously decide to close the book. You release the event itself, along with the associated self-judgment, because clinging to it serves no purpose other than to drain your present moment energy and cloud your current focus. The mistake becomes a piece of data, not a life sentence. This practice of letting go is not an act of erasure or pretending the past didn't happen. It is an act of careful curation. You are curating the contents of your own mind, choosing which thoughts are allowed to occupy valuable space. You are acknowledging that while you cannot control the fact that the event occurred, you have absolute control over the meaning you assign to it today and the amount of mental real estate you rent out to it. Holding onto a past grievance or a past failure is like carrying a heavy, rotten piece of luggage everywhere you go long after the trip is over. It doesn't change the journey you already took. It only makes your current journey unnecessarily burdensome. Letting go is the simple, profound act of finally setting that luggage down and walking away from it, feeling immediately lighter and freer to move toward what is next. So let's turn this into a moment of quiet, honest reflection. What is the piece of luggage you are still carrying from your own past? What specific event, mistake, or perceived failure from last month, last year, or even a decade ago still has the power to draw your mind back into its orbit, bringing with it a shadow of regret, anger, or shame? Identify it clearly. Now apply the Stoic test. Can you change it? The answer is no. It is a collection of moments that have already evaporated into time. Then ask the second question. What constructive lesson, if any, can I take from this that will serve me now? Extract that lesson with the detached curiosity of a scientist. Finally, and this is the most important step, make a conscious choice. Decide that you will no longer pay the emotional rent on that past memory. Every time it arises, you will acknowledge its presence, thank it for the lesson it already provided, and gently but firmly redirect your attention back to the only place where your life is actually happening, the present moment. This is not a one-time event but a practice. You may have to release that same memory 100 times, but each time you do, you weaken its hold on you until one day you realize you can remember the event without reliving the pain. You have not forgotten the past, you have simply finally and completely let it go. This profound ability to let go of what is already finished is what gives us the mental clarity and emotional bandwidth to face what is yet to come. And it is here that we encounter one of the most practical and empowering Stoic practices of all, the mental preparation for uncertainty. The Stoics did not see the future as a terrifying abyss of unknowns to be feared, but as a natural landscape of constant change to be navigated with flexibility and calm. Their central insight was that anxiety about the future is almost always a product of our own unrealistic expectations, the quiet, hidden assumption that things will continue as they are, that our plans will unfold without a hitch, and that the world will conform to our desires. The Stoic remedy for this anxiety was not to try and predict every possible outcome in a futile attempt to control the uncontrollable, but to do the exact opposite, to fully and consciously expect the unexpected. By mentally rehearsing the fact that change is the only constant, they inoculated themselves against the shock and disorientation that sudden upheavals can bring, allowing them to remain adaptable, resilient, and imperturbable no matter what the future held. The Roman philosopher Seneca, who lived through the political instability and personal exile that characterized much of Nero's reign, articulated this principle with stunning clarity. He wrote, "You live in fear because you live in anticipation of what may happen, but what can happen that is not unforeseen? Let that question settle for a moment." Seneca is pointing out the fundamental flaw in our anxious forecasting. We are trying to anticipate the unanticipatable. We worry about specific outcomes, losing a job, a relationship ending, an illness striking. But the true nature of the future is that it will deliver events we simply cannot imagine from our present vantage point. His solution, therefore, was to embrace the certainty of uncertainty itself. He advised, "Let all your efforts be directed to something. Let it keep that end in view." It's not activity that disturbs people, but false conceptions of things that drive them mad. The disturbance comes not from the activity of planning, but from the false conception that our plans are guarantees. When we hold our plans lightly as preferred outcomes rather than certainties, we free ourselves from the madness of expecting the world to obey our personal script. We can see the profound relevance of this principle in our modern world, which often feels defined by volatility. Consider the realm of personal finance and economic instability. Many people build their entire sense of security on the foundation of a stable job, a thriving investment portfolio, or a robust economy. Then, a market correction happens, an industry is disrupted by new technology, or a global pandemic shifts the very nature of work. For the person who attached their peace to those external conditions, this is a catastrophic event that triggers intense anxiety, panic, and a feeling of freefall. The Stoic, however, has already done the mental work of preparedness. They have not been irresponsible, they have saved money and developed skills, but they have also held the outcomes of those actions loosely. They understood that markets fluctuate and economies cycle as a matter of their very nature. This prior acceptance of reality means that when the downturn arrives, they are not blindsided. They meet it not with panic, but with a calm, pragmatic adaptability. They might tighten their budget, explore new income streams, or use the time to retrain not from a place of fear, but from a place of clear-eyed engagement with the new reality. Their inner stability, built on the rock of their own character and their expectation of change, remains unshaken even as the external world trembles. This practice of preparedness is a form of mental flexibility training. It's like the difference between a rigid oak tree and a flexible willow in a storm. The oak, expecting only calm weather, stands stiff and tall until a powerful wind snaps its branches. The willow, by its very nature, expects the wind. It bends and sways, its flexibility allowing it to withstand forces that would destroy a more rigid structure. The Stoic mind is the willow. By expecting change, it becomes adaptable. By accepting uncertainty, it finds a deeper certainty within itself. This doesn't mean living in a state of paranoid anticipation, constantly waiting for disaster to strike. It means cultivating a serene and confident understanding that you possess the internal resources to handle whatever does strike. You are not preparing for specific disasters. You are preparing your own character to be disaster-resistant. So, let's turn this inward for a truly transformative reflection. How much of your current mental energy is spent trying to mentally control the uncontrollable future? How often do you find yourself playing out anxious scenarios in your mind, attempting to solve problems that haven't even happened yet? Now, imagine what would happen if you took all that energy and redirected it. Instead of using your imagination to fear the future, you used it to fortify your present. What if you channeled that effort into strengthening your skills, deepening your relationships, and most importantly, reinforcing the unshakable belief in your own ability to adapt and endure? How might the simple act of accepting uncertainty, of truly internalizing that the future will be unpredictable, actually liberate you from the low-grade anxiety that so often accompanies modern life? It would allow you to plan diligently for the best while being peacefully prepared for anything else, trusting that the person you are becoming is more than capable of meeting whatever comes next. And so we arrive at the very engine room of this entire Stoic endeavor, the foundational skill upon which every other practice depends, the unwavering commitment to self-awareness. All the principles we've discussed, the dichotomy of control, cognitive distancing, the discipline of assent, are merely abstract theories if we do not first possess a deep and honest understanding of the person who is meant to be applying them. You cannot master your reactions if you are not intimately familiar with the raw, automatic impulses that drive them. You cannot question your judgments if you are not aware that you are even making them in the first place. Stoicism, far from being a philosophy of robotic suppression, demands a courageous and unflinching journey inward. It requires us to become dedicated cartographers of our own inner landscape, meticulously mapping our biases, our hidden triggers, our ingrained patterns of thought, and the subtle ways our ego defends itself. This is not a task for the faint of heart, for it involves turning a light onto parts of ourselves we might prefer to keep in shadow, but it is the non-negotiable first step toward genuine self-mastery. The Stoic teacher Epictetus, whose teachings have guided us throughout, placed this truth at the very beginning of the path. He famously stated, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." This is far more than a quip about ignoring gossip. It is a profound instruction on the prerequisite for growth. To become self-aware, we must be willing to relinquish the polished, perfect image we hold of ourselves and confront the reality of our own fallibility. We must be willing to observe our own thoughts and actions with the detached curiosity of a scientist, even when what we see is foolish, stupid, or unflattering. Epictetus is urging us to drop the exhausting performance of having it all figured out. Only when we stop pretending to be wise can we actually begin to become wise. The journey of 1,000 miles begins not with a step, but with the honest admission that you do not know the way. This process of self-examination is how we begin to identify what we might call our emotional and cognitive autopilots. These are the knee-jerk reactions, the instant judgments, and the sensitive spots that cause us to flare up or shut down without any conscious thought. For one person, the trigger might be a perceived lack of respect, a certain tone of voice from a partner or a colleague that instantly ignites a defensive anger. For another, it might be a fear of incompetence, a minor mistake at work that spirals into a whole day of crippling self-doubt and anxiety. A third person might have a trigger around control. Any unexpected change of plans, however minor, can trigger a disproportionate sense of frustration and agitation. We all have these raw nerves. The goal of Stoic self-awareness is not to eliminate them, which is likely impossible, but to find them, name them, and understand them so thoroughly that they lose their power to hijack our reason. So how do we actually do this? How do we move from the abstract ideal of self-awareness to the practical reality of knowing ourselves? The Stoics themselves were great advocates of daily practices that served as mirrors for the soul. One of the most powerful is the simple habit of journaling, not as a diary of events, but as a logbook of your inner world. At the end of each day, you might take just a few minutes to ask yourself a series of targeted questions. When did I feel a strong negative emotion today? What was the specific event that preceded it? What was the immediate, automatic thought that flashed through my mind in that moment? Was that thought completely true, or was it a distortion or an assumption? This kind of reflective writing forces you to slow down the film reel of your day and pause it on the critical frames where your reactions were formed. Over time, patterns begin to emerge. You might see that your anger is rarely about the surface-level event, but almost always about a deeper feeling of being undervalued. You might notice that your anxiety is triggered not by actual threats, but by a catastrophic story your mind tells about the future. Another indispensable practice is mindfulness, or the deliberate effort to pay attention to your present moment experience without immediate judgment. This is the in-the-moment counterpart to evening journaling. It's the practice of catching yourself in the act. For instance, you're in a meeting and someone critiques your idea. You feel the familiar heat rise in your neck. Instead of immediately launching into a defense or retreating into sullen silence, you simply notice the sensation. You mentally note, there is defensiveness, or there is the feeling of being threatened. This simple act of naming the emotion creates a tiny but crucial gap between the feeling and your action. It doesn't make the feeling disappear, but it allows you to see it as a passing weather pattern in your mind, rather than as a command you must obey. This is self-awareness in its most active form, being the watchman of your own mind, observing the thoughts and feelings as they arrive at the gate before you decide whether to grant them entry. Now let's turn this into a personal and immediate exercise. Don't just think about this conceptually, engage with it directly. I want you to pause for a moment and think back over the last week. Can you identify just one or two specific moments where you had a reaction that felt bigger than the event itself? A time when you snapped at someone, withdrew emotionally, or felt a surge of anxiety that seemed to come out of nowhere? Now gently rewind the tape and look for the trigger. What was the event that preceded it? More importantly, what was the story you told yourself about that event in that instant? Did you interpret a delayed text message as a sign of rejection? Did you interpret a passing comment from your boss as a threat to your job security? Your emotional triggers are hidden in these interpretations. Your journey to a non-reactive mind begins with the courageous and compassionate work of uncovering them, not to condemn yourself, but to understand yourself, and in doing so, to finally set yourself free. This powerful Stoic shift in perspective brings us to a principle that is perhaps the most empowering of all, the art of finding genuine opportunity within our obstacles. This is far more than just positive thinking or looking for a silver lining. For the Stoics, this was a fundamental re-engineering of reality itself, a deliberate and creative act of reframing where we stop seeing a barrier as a stop sign and start seeing it as the very raw material for our growth and progress. They understood that a smooth, unchallenged path does little to reveal our true character or to strengthen our capabilities. It is resistance that builds muscle, both physical and mental. An obstacle, by its very nature, forces us to stop, to reassess, to think differently, and to access resources within ourselves that we never would have discovered had our original plan proceeded without a hitch. The obstacle doesn't just block the path, it becomes the path, offering a detour that often leads to a far more interesting and resilient destination. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who faced countless military, political, and personal challenges, meditated on this idea constantly. He offered himself this stunning piece of advice, a true cornerstone of the Stoic mindset. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Let's sit with that profound paradox for a moment. The impediment advances action. The thing that appears to be blocking your progress is, in fact, the very mechanism that will propel you forward if you know how to work with it. He is not saying the obstacle disappears or becomes easy. He is saying that your creative, virtuous engagement with the obstacle is what moves the work ahead. The barrier is no longer an external enemy to be raged against. It is the central puzzle to be solved, the weight to be lifted, the challenge that will inevitably make you stronger, wiser, and more capable than you were before you encountered it. The obstacle is not in your way, it is the way. We can see this principle play out with incredible clarity in the modern world of innovation and business. Consider the story of a small tech startup that has invested 18 months and its entire seed funding into developing a new software product. The launch day arrives and it is a spectacular failure. The servers crash under the load, a critical security flaw is discovered, and the reviews are scathing. The immediate, reactive interpretation of this event is catastrophe. It's easy to see it as a definitive end, a reason to disband the team and give up, but a leader with a Stoic mindset would apply a different framework. They would first accept the reality of the failure without sugarcoating it. Then they would begin the work of creative reframing. They would ask, how does this impediment advance our action? How does this failure become our way forward? The answers that emerge are not just positive spins, they are strategic insights. The server crash revealed a critical scalability issue that would have been far more devastating 6 months later with 10 times the users. The security flaw discovered early saved the company from a potentially company-ending day to breach down the line. The harsh criticism is a treasure trove of direct, unfiltered user feedback, providing a perfect blueprint for what to fix and what to build next. The failure didn't destroy the project. It provided the essential, albeit painful, data required to build a truly excellent and robust version 2.0. The obstacle became the most effective and ruthless quality assurance team they could never have afforded to hire. This practice is not reserved for grand corporate dramas. It is just as potent in the arena of our daily personal lives. Imagine you have a goal to get into better physical shape, but you sustain a minor injury that prevents you from your usual running routine. The obstacle is the injured ankle. The reactive response is frustration, a sense of derailment, and perhaps abandoning the fitness goal altogether. The Stoic response is to ask, how can this impediment advance my action? How can this become the way? This reframing forces a creative solution. Perhaps you discover the world of swimming or upper body strength training, activities your running habit had always crowded out. You might develop a more well-rounded fitness regimen that actually makes you a healthier athlete in the long run. The obstacle didn't stop your journey to health. It forced you onto a new path that ultimately made your fitness more resilient and sustainable. The obstacle became the way, so let's turn this powerful lens onto your own life right now. Bring to mind a current obstacle, a challenge that feels like a frustrating roadblock. It might be a difficult person at work, a financial constraint, a health issue, or a creative project that just isn't coming together. Now, I want you to try a simple but profound exercise in Stoic reframing. Instead of focusing on how it is holding you back, ask yourself these three questions. First, what is this obstacle forcing me to learn that I otherwise might have avoided? Second, how is it requiring me to strengthen a part of my character, perhaps my patience, my creativity, or my courage that has been underdeveloped? And third, if I were to accept this obstacle not as a nuisance but as my primary teacher, what specific new action does it invite me to take? You may find that the very thing you saw as a wall has a door in it you never noticed, a door that leads not back to your old path, but forward to a new and better one. This brings us to a crucial distinction that lies at the very heart of Stoic philosophy, one that often gets lost in modern interpretations: the vital difference between emotional repression and emotional harmony. The popular caricature of a Stoic is a cold, unfeeling robot, someone who has successfully eliminated all passion and feeling to become a perfectly logical and perfectly dull statue. But this is a profound misunderstanding of their actual goal. The Stoics were not aiming for emotional numbness, they were striving for emotional intelligence of the highest order. They did not seek to destroy their feelings, but to educate them. Their ideal was a state where our emotions are not the wild, untamed horses that drag our chariot wherever they please, but are instead well-trained partners, guided by the skilled hand of our reason. This is the balance between emotion and reason, a partnership where feeling informs thought and thought refines feeling, creating a harmonious inner symphony rather than a cacophony of conflicting impulses. The Stoics wisely made a distinction between different kinds of emotional experiences. They rejected what they called the pathe, the unhealthy, excessive, and destructive passions. These are the emotions that hijack our reason, that spiral out of control, and that lead us to act in ways we later regret. Think of blinding rage, consuming jealousy, paralyzing fear, or bottomless grief. These are the storms that wreck the ship, but they wholeheartedly embraced the eupatheiai, the good, reasonable, and healthy feelings. These include a profound sense of joy, chara, that comes from living virtuously, a willful wishing boulesis for things that are truly good, and a sense of cautious discretion, eulabeia, that protects us from error. They weren't trying to feel nothing, they were trying to feel the right things in the right way to the right degree. This is the essence of emotional harmony, not an absence of feeling, but a richness of appropriate feeling. The Roman philosopher Seneca, who wrote with such piercing insight about the human heart, provides our clearest guide on this delicate balancing act. In his work on anger, he draws a critical line explaining, "The question has been raised whether it is better to have moderate emotions or none at all." Our philosophers reject the emotions, the peripatetics keep them in check. I, however, do not understand how any halfway disease can be either wholesome or helpful. While this might seem like he's advocating for total elimination, Seneca's deeper point is about the danger of half measures with destructive passions. You cannot be moderately consumed by rage. The very nature of the passion is to be excessive. However, in his broader body of work, he consistently argues for the management and guidance of our emotional life by reason. He advises us not to cut out our heart, but to install reason as its governor. He suggests we should feel anger, for instance, but only as an initial signal that something is wrong. a signal that must then be immediately handed over to our rational mind for processing and to determine a virtuous response. The feeling is the messenger, reason is the commander who decides what to do with the message. Let's make this balance tangible with a scenario that unfolds in countless homes every day. Imagine you're having a busy, stressful evening. You're trying to get dinner on the table, help one child with their homework, and stop the other from drawing on the wall. In the midst of this chaos, your partner walks in, glances at the messy kitchen, and makes a slightly critical remark like, "Wow, it looks like a bomb went off in here." The immediate, raw, emotional response is a flash of hot anger. This is the pathos. It's visceral and automatic. Your body tenses, your heart rate jumps, and a sharp retort leaps to your tongue. Well, maybe if you helped once in a while instead of just criticizing, it wouldn't be like this. This is the reactive impulse, the untamed horse bolting. Now apply the Stoic balance. You feel that initial surge of anger. You don't suppress it or pretend it's not there. You acknowledge the feeling as a piece of data. I am feeling anger, but then you immediately engage your reason. You create that vital pause. You ask yourself rational questions. Is this comment truly a malicious attack, or is it a poorly worded observation from someone who is also tired? Is responding with a counterattack going to improve this situation or make it worse? What is my ultimate goal here? To win an argument or to have a peaceful family dinner? This rational interrogation doesn't eliminate the feeling of being slighted, but it surrounds it with context and perspective. It allows you to choose a response that aligns with your deeper values. Instead of the reactive snap, you might take a breath and say, "It has been a really chaotic afternoon, and a comment like that doesn't feel helpful. I could really use a hand getting things together so we can all relax." This response acknowledges your feeling without being ruled by it. It communicates the hurt calmly and proposes a constructive solution. The emotion was felt, but it was reason that drove the car. This is the daily, moment-to-moment practice of emotional alchemy. It's about transforming the base metal of a raw, reactive feeling into the gold of a considered, virtuous response. It requires us to be deeply in touch with our emotions, to feel them fully, but to refuse them the final vote on our actions. Our feelings provide the color and the music of our human experience. Reason provides the composition and the structure. One without the other is incomplete. A life of pure reason would be barren and disconnected. A life of pure emotion would be chaotic and destructive. The Stoic ideal is the beautiful, sometimes challenging, integration of both. So let's turn this inward for our honest assessment. How does the balance feel in your own life? When a strong emotion arises, be it anger, anxiety, jealousy, or even intense desire, what is the typical chain of command? Does the feeling immediately grab the wheel and start driving, often leading to a destination you later regret? Or are you able to invite reason into the passenger seat to help navigate? This isn't about achieving perfect balance in every single moment. It's about the direction of travel. The next time you feel that familiar heat of irritation or the cold grip of worry, see if you can catch it just a second earlier. Don't try to stop the feeling, just observe it, and in that observation, whisper a simple question to your rational mind. What is the wisest, most constructive thing to do with this energy? That question is the beginning of the balance. That is the moment you stop being a passenger in your own emotional life and start becoming its skilled and compassionate pilot. And so we reach the end of our journey through the Stoic Toolkit, a collection of mental disciplines designed for one profound purpose: to engineer a mind that is not easily shaken by the inevitable chaos of life. We began by learning to sort the world through the foundational lens of the dichotomy of control, understanding that our peace is found by focusing our energy exclusively on what is ours to command, our judgments, our intentions, and our actions, while gracefully accepting everything else that is not. We then explored the practice of cognitive distancing, that crucial art of inserting a pause between an event and our reaction, creating the space to choose our response rather than being hijacked by our initial impulse. We ventured into the seemingly counterintuitive territory of Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of challenges, not to dwell in fear but to inoculate ourselves against the shock of adversity by making the unfamiliar familiar. We discovered the transformative power of Amorfati, the love of one's fate, which teaches us to embrace every single event, especially the difficult ones, as necessary and beneficial for our growth. We honed the discipline of assent, learning to act as a skeptical judge of our own automatic impressions before we accept them as truth, recognizing that we are disturbed not by things, but by our views of them. We expanded our perspective with the view from above, zooming out to a cosmic scale to see our problems in their true, manageable proportion. We practiced objective judgment, striving to see events in their neutral reality, free from the value labels of good or bad that so often cause our suffering. We fortified our inner citadel, that unassailable fortress of self that remains calm amidst external turmoil. We engaged in voluntary discomfort, training our resilience like a muscle so we will be prepared for life's involuntary hardships. We learned to distinguish between a mindful response and a reactive impulse, widening that critical gap where our freedom resides. We practiced the art of non-attachment, freeing ourselves from dependency on externals for our happiness. And we redefined joy itself, understanding that true Eudaimonia, human flourishing, comes not from external success but from living a life of virtue and inner excellence. These are not mere philosophical ideas. They are practical tools for building an unshakable inner resilience. They are the engineering blueprints for a psyche that can withstand personal setbacks, professional pressures, and even the collective collapses that seem to define our modern age. When the world feels like it's falling apart, your mind doesn't have to fall apart with it. You have the capacity to remain steady, clear, and purposeful, not because you are immune to difficulty, but because you have trained yourself to meet it with wisdom. This is the ultimate freedom the Stoics promised us. As Epictetus so perfectly put it, no person is free who is not master of themselves. True freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want. It is the power to want what is right and to choose your inner state, regardless of what is happening around you. This freedom is your birthright, but it is not given, it is built, and you build it not through a single grand gesture, but through the consistent daily application of these practices. You don't need to master them all at once. In fact, you cannot. The journey begins with a single, small step. Choose just one principle that resonated most deeply with you today. Perhaps it's simply pausing to apply the dichotomy of control the next time you feel a wave of anxiety. Maybe it's trying a 5-minute evening review to reflect on your day. It could be as simple as looking at a minor inconvenience and asking, "How can I love this small piece of my fate?" Start there. Practice it for a week and simply observe the subtle shifts in your reactions, your stress levels, and your overall sense of peace. This is how you move philosophy from the page into the pulse of your daily life. If you found this journey valuable and want to continue exploring how ancient wisdom can help you navigate modern life, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the notification bell. We have many more deep dives into Stoicism and other practical philosophies coming your way, and I would truly love to hear from you in the comments below. Which Stoic practice are you going to try first? What challenges are you facing where this wisdom might help? Share your experiences. Your story could be the inspiration someone else needs to start their own journey toward a non-reactive mind. Thank you for watching, and remember, the power to build an unshakable peace no matter what happens has always